Chapter 14, Propositions. It wasn't long before the Umbu women arrived at their destination, dragging Kakashi passed out due to sheer exhaustion along. They opened the door to the large room, revealing a dozen other female Umbu awaiting their arrival. "We got us another one." One of the girls toting Kakashi yelled happily. There were some noises of excitement as all the Umbu surrounded him. They blinked. There was a long pause. "He looks kinda dead." "Not the Umbu that brought Kakashi," said, waving her hand. "He'll be fine." Kakashi twitched slightly. "I guess." Suddenly, the door to the place opened once again. They all looked up from the collapsed jounin to see. In the doorway was a tall, orange-haired Umbu wearing a raccoon dog mask. Holding her hand was Gaara. He had a flower crown on his head. "Aw, isn't he precious?" Several of the Umbu surrounding Kakashi squealed as they rushed over to look at Gaara. The raccoon dog female Umbu's sweat dropped. And so, Kakashi finally got a few moments of peace while the Umbu were preoccupied with hugging on Gaara and petting his hair and telling him how cute he is. Tsunade was sitting at her desk when there was a knock at her office door. "Come in." Tsunade called out casually. "Hey, baby." The Hokage narrowed her eyes. "You again, Jiraiya?" she said with mild annoyance. Jiraiya smirked playful as he went around the front of her desk before slapping his hands on the table. "I challenge you to a drinking contest," he yelled dramatically. Tsunade raised an eyebrow. "What?" "I bet that I can drink more than you," Jiraiya said. Tsunade shot him a skeptical look. "You don't have any money. You don't even have enough to buy any liquor. That's why you'll be buying the sake," Jiraiya said, very sure of himself. Tsunade laughed. "You just want me to pay for you to get yourself drunk." No. "Listen." Jiraiya leaned on her desk. "You like to gamble, right?" Tsunade rolled her eyes. "How about this?" Jiraiya continued. "If I win the drinking contest, you have to sleep with me, but if you win, I have to sleep with you." Tsunade stared at Jiraiya and blinked. No. Ever since her fight with Shikamaru, Temari had done nothing but search for her brothers. She had yet to find them. How could she? She would never have thought that on the list of places Kankuro and Gaara were most likely to hang out that Kiba's sister's house and a flower bed would be at the top of the list. Now, Temari found herself sitting in a chair next to an outdoor restaurant, taking a rest, watching the various people of Konoha walking down the street. Suddenly, she spotted Kankuro. He was walking with some woman. "Kankuro!" Temari screamed. "Where have you been?" "We still haven't reported to the Hokage." Sorry for running off." Kankuro winced as he spotted Temari, "but I'm kinda busy," he said, looking over at Hana. "Can't you just go by yourself?" "I did go by myself," Temari sighed, "but the Hokage wasn't in. Anyway, her assistant asked where the rest of us were. So, I decided to track you guys down before I go back." Kankuro blinked. Kiba's sister whispered something into his ear. "I've really gotta go, Temari," Kankuro said apologetically. Temari looked like she was ready to whap Kankuro with her fan that was, until she spotted a certain someone waltzing down the street. "Gaara?" Gaara was walking down the street, a female Umbu attached at each hand. The two girls were both sporting raccoon dog masks, except the first's mask had red markings on the white part, while the second had blue. Apparently, a little while ago when he was swarmed with attention by the Umbu women, he gained a new friend. Temari blinked. "When did that happen?" Kankuro exclaimed, wide-eyed. "Meanwhile, I almost had him." Ino screamed in frustration. "Sure," Sakura said sarcastically, rolling her eyes as she walked next to Ino. At the moment, inner Sakura was secretly having a party over the fact that Ino, too, failed at getting any from Sasuke. Yes. Huh. Stupid Ino. Sasuke can still be mine. Just as Ino was about to go on another rant, she happened to spot Shikamaru. Huh? Ino thought as she looked over at her teammate. Wait a second. Ino suddenly broke off from Sakura and ran up to Shikamaru as a light bulb went off in her head. Sakura paused and blinked a moment before she just kept on walking. Shikamaru. Ino yelled playfully in a sing-song fashion. "HN?" Shikamaru looked over as she rushed up to him. "What is it?" "Could you," she began slowly, "do something for me?" Shikamaru blinked. "You want me to what?" Shikamaru said skeptically. "All you would have to do is hold him still with your shadow for just a little bit." Ino pleaded. "It's too troublesome." Shikamaru replied flatly. "Besides, it would not be right to do such a thing to Sasuke." "Please?" Ino begged as Shikamaru turned and began to leave. She blinked as he left. I could fondle you some more maybe? Sakura vaguely wondered what Ino and Shikamaru could be talking about as she continued on her way. Hey, Sakura! Sakura turned around to see Lee running up to her. He was carrying a handful of flowers along with some sort of note. Blushing, Lee immediately handed the flowers and note to Sakura before turning around and running off again. Bye, Sakura. The pink-haired ninja blinked. Lee? She glanced down at the gifts he left her in her hands. The flowers were beautiful. The note was Sakura unfolded the note. Another poem? She said as she began to read it. Lotus blossom of youthfulness blooms. Sakura, your hair is pretty. A haiku by Lee. Sakura's eyebrow twitched slightly. Next, Sakura passed by Shino, Hinata, and Kiba. Shino looked deep in thought. Well, Shino always looks deep in thought. In reality, Shino was thinking back to his dinner with Hinata. She had pecked him on the cheek when she left that night. Hinata seemed zoned out as well, until Sakura noticed her eyes following something. It was a certain yellow-haired ninja that was coming this way. He was walking along, staring at the ground. Naruto? Hinata peeped as he drew closer. Huh? Naruto looked up at the sound of his name. But, then wahhh. As soon as he spotted Sakura, Naruto started bawling as he ran away. I hope your babies have pink hair. Unfortunately, Naruto was still under the impression that Sasuke slept with the pink-haired ninja. Sakura, Hinata, and Kiba blinked. What's his problem? Sakura asked with a confused look. In the end, Temari had to give up on trying to get Kankuro or Gaara to go with her to the Hokage's office. So, she decided to go by herself again. As Temari arrived, opening the door to Tsunade's office, she caught the tail end of a conversation. You know, if I was infertile I'd use it as an excuse to have even more sex. Oh, Jiraiya, you never have any sex. How would you know? Am I interrupting something? Temari added. Jiraiya blinked. No. Tsunade smiled at the sand ninja. How can I help you? I'm just reporting, and Temari replied as she came closer. I guess I should explain your mission details to you. Tsunade said. Temari took a seat in front of the Hokage. Oh! Tsunade suddenly exclaimed, pulling 3 papers out of her desk and handing it to Temari. Could you make sure that you and the other sand ninjas fill these out? The blonde sand ninja raised an eyebrow as she looked at the paper. What is it? It's, Tsunade said slyly, a survey of sorts. 2 days later, Tsunade once again found herself writing letters. This time would be the 3rd round. Hokage-sama? Shizen asked as she watched the Hokage scribbling along. If you do this again, don't you think the shinobi will start to catch on? Tsunade looked up at Shizen. They haven't figured it out so far. I've been using different perfumes on the envelopes every time to throw them off. Shizen titled her head. Do you think maybe you should send out some letters to people who didn't put each other on their lists so it won't look as suspicious? Tsunade said as she tapped her finger on the table. Maybe I will mix it up a bit. The Hokage grinned as she began to write out the letters. Dear Sakura, your hair makes me hungry for you. If it's not too troublesome, please come see me tonight. Love, dear Hinata, you are really sweet and cute like a puppy dog. Can I come over to your place tonight? Love, dear Ino, your name is Ino, right? I think I spelled that right, dear Tenten. I'm not interested in you or anything. I just need someone to talk to about stuff. Could you give me some advice? At my place tonight? It only took Itachi and Kisame 2 days to reach Konoha. Itachi didn't take 2 steps inside the village before he was swept up by an umbu. Kisame could only stand there and blink in shock. There was a long pause. A minute later, Kisame found Itachi on his bow on the ground, having been thrown back, the umbu's sweat dropping profusely and zipping off into the distance, yelling something back in their direction. Oh shit. Sorry dude, I thought you were a woman. The male umbu yelled an apology. And so, the first male umbu to attempt to follow the female's example was the last. It was just too risky. Half the time, that pretty, long-haired woman over yonder is actually a pretty, long-haired man. Itachi blinked. Itachi? Kisame asked questioningly as Itachi slowly picked himself back up, turned around and began to slowly walk back out of the village again. Itachi? Kisame blinked as he watched his fellow Akatsuki member pass outside the gates. Suddenly Chuji happened to pass by. Kisame stared at the genin. Chuji stared back. Choji's eyes began to get really wide as he suddenly lifted his arm and pointed at Kisame. Kisame blinked. Sushi! Chuji suddenly yelled, whipping out a huge butcher knife from behind his back. Kisame's eyes went wide as he began to twitch involuntarily. Sushi! Chuji yelled louder, coming after Kisame. Kisame's sweat dropped as he turned and ran after Itachi in confusion. He was so shocked he dropped his sword along the way. Chuji sighed as the big, yummy-looking shark man disappeared into the distance. Chapter 15, Pick Me Up. Yet again, Tsunade finished up a batch of letters and got Shizen to hand them off to the express mail ninjas. Many unexpecting shinobi would be finding their doors filled with sharp projectiles sent filled envelopes attached to them by a string. Sakura just happened to be over at Ino's house when the blonde ninja checked her mail. Ino made a strange face as she read the note. What the HM? Sakura asked, filled with curiosity. How the heck did I get a letter from that stupid blonde? Ino said, waving her arms in disbelief. Look who's talking. Sakura smirked as she pointed at Ino's hair. A blood vessel popped up on Ino's forehead as she fumed. I met Naruto. Sakura raised an eyebrow, somewhat surprised that he would be sending Ino a love letter. What does it say? Sakura asked as she peeped over Ino's shoulder to look at the note. Ino shrugged. He wants to meet me at the ramen place, she scoffed. Heh, Sakura grinned as she said playfully, I guess you will need someone once Sasuke is all mine. Dream on, Sakura. Ino glared at the pink-haired genin, folding up the note. Sakura briefly bared her teeth at Ino before another thought popped into her head. So are you going to go? Ino shrugged. Might as well have got to eat something anyway. Jiraiya was spending his afternoon trudging along with his hands in his pockets on the streets of Konoha. He had an expression on his face that was somewhere between disgusted and disappointed. The perverted white-haired man briefly glanced up at the rooftops, pondering in passing why there seemed to be fewer and fewer Umbu attacks these past 2 days. Suddenly, his ears picked up a noise to his right. He turned to see Naruto sitting on the ground, blowing his nose rather loudly and repeatedly. Jiraiya looked at the poor genin, thinking that he looked rather down, even more down on his luck that he was. Oi, Jiraiya said, walking up to Naruto, what's wrong with you? Sniffle, 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 this girl I like, Naruto whined. She's having some other guy's babies, ah. Jiraiya said, nodding his head in understanding, what else is new? Naruto blinked as Jiraiya seemed to be staring off in the distance. What? Huh? Jiraiya looked back at Naruto. Anyway, Naruto continued, I got a note from this other girl to go eat ramen, but I've never been on a date and I don't know what to do, and you've come to the right place. Jiraiya said dramatically, striking a pose. With Jiraiya's advice, you are sure to score. Naruto scrunched up his face. Score what? Jiraiya's sweat dropped, relaxing his pose. Naruto just continued to stare at him. Jiraiya looked at Naruto in disbelief, trying to think of something. Oh! Jiraiya exclaimed as he began to dig through his satchel, I can lend you my book. Naruto's eyes went wide, and oh no. He waved his hands furiously, I don't want one of your dirty perverted books. Nah, Jiraiya waved a hand at Naruto reassuringly, it's not that, it's just my personal book of pickup lines. Jiraiya grinned as he placed a small black book into Naruto's curious hands. Pick a what? Naruto asked, glancing at the book in his hands skeptically. Jiraiya slapped his hand against his own head, you don't know anything, do you? What? Nothing, Jiraiya said quickly, just all you have to do is read some lines to the girl and she will be all over you. Really? Naruto said, grinning with excitement. Yeah. Jiraiya smiled, scratching his head. Wow, thanks. Naruto exclaimed, sticking the book in his pocket as Jiraiya turned to leave. You get a lot of letters from girls, huh? Naruto called out as he stood up. Jiraiya smirked, hundreds, no, thousands. Yeah. In his dreams. That night, it all started once again. Hinata paced around her room, fiddling with her fingers nervously. She sighed as she wondered when Kiba would get there. She smiled as she thought of the letter she received. It had been really sweet of Kiba. Hinata peeped slightly as she heard a knock. She rushed over to let her teammate in. Hinata opened the door to reveal Kiba with Akamaru on his head as always. Kiba grinned as Akamaru barked in greeting. Hi. She said sheepishly. Hey, Hinata. Kiba replied. As he stepped through the door, Hinata spoke again. See, could you take off your jade jacket? Kiba blinked at the sudden question, a blush appearing across his face. Why? Hinata's face turned red. I like your hair? Really? Kiba smiled, slowly taking his hat off and setting his jacket to the side. Hinata nodded as she stared at his spiky hair, that hair that reminded her so much of Naruto's. Elsewhere, Naruto and Ino were just kind of staring at each other as they sat in their chairs in front of the ramen stand. Ino was tapping her foot and looking rather disinterested, while Naruto was staring at her trying to remember what her name was. Eventually, Ino got tired of the silence. "Say something," she demanded as she finished slurping down some more noodles. Naruto scrutinized her, scrunching up his face, trying to think of a topic. There was a long pause. "Hey, your hair is the same color as mine," Naruto exclaimed as though he had just noticed this fact. Ino's eyebrow twitched in aggravation. "Thanks for stating the obvious," she replied, dripping with sarcasm. Naruto grinned. "You're welcome." Ino sighed. "Remind me why I even bothered to come here," she said to no one in particular. Of course, Naruto felt that this was directed at him. He explained slowly, "Because you wanted to buy me some ramen?" Ino stared at him like he was crazy. "I thought you said you were paying." "What?" Naruto mumbled, choking down another mouthful of ramen before gasping. "I thought you were." Ino narrowed her eyes at him. "That's it, I'm out of here." Naruto's eyes went wide as she started to get up. No. "Wait!" he pleaded as he frantically searched his pockets, just having remembered Jiraiya's gift from earlier. Ino plopped back down in her seat, curiosity getting the better of her at what could possibly be so special about the little black book that Naruto was currently flipping through furiously. She blinked as he stopped on a page. She watched as he stumbled over his words, sweating profusely. Naruto began, "How'd you like to feel my chakra?" He grinned sheepishly. "What?" she asked, confused. Naruto's sweat dropped, flipping to another page. "How'd you like to unfurl my sacred scroll?" Ino exclaimed, tilting her head. Naruto looked up at her and then over at the other page, doing his best to give her a sexy smile. "How'd you like to see my kunai?" Ino glared at him as she began to catch on. Naruto scooted a little closer, finding another line on the page. "How'd you like to have my throwing knife in your shuriken?" Ino gaped at him in disgust as he scratched his head and laughed nervously. Naruto didn't get a chance to flip to another page, because Ino suddenly grabbed him viciously by his orange collar, throwing him into the air. "You damn pervert!" she screamed as he landed across the street in an alleyway. Naruto groggily got up from the ground just in time to see Ino's fist connecting squarely with his face. "H!" he yelled as he was laid out in the street. This time he was knocked unconscious, eyes spinning. "Humph!" Ino grunted, smacking her hands together to get the pervert cooties off as she stared at a job well done. Just as she was about to storm off in a huff, she heard a voice. Coughed the ramen shop manager, holding out his hand, awaiting payment for the Genin's meals. Ino's sweat dropped before immediately pointing at Naruto accusingly. "Put it on his tab?" The restaurant guy shook his head a firm no. "Ugh!" Ino exclaimed as she dug through Naruto's pockets, not finding any money. She squealed in frustration as she went back over to the ramen stand and got her own money out to pay for their meals. As Sakura made her way over to Shikamaru's house, she thought back to the letter she had received from him. It just didn't seem right. In fact, it was really weird. Sakura shrugged off her curious thoughts. "I guess I'll find out in a moment," she pondered aloud as she knocked on his door. It was a few minutes before Shikamaru bothered to let her in. "So troublesome," he greeted. Sakura raised an eyebrow at him. "You're the one who invited me." Shikamaru lit up from his daze a bit. "What?" "Your letter," Sakura stated as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Shikamaru blinked. "I didn't send you any letter," he stated as he had a seat on the floor. "Huh?" Sakura questioned, filled with confusion as she sat on the edge of his bed, facing him. Shikamaru hummed, closing his eyes and posing his hands just so in deep contemplation. Within 5 minutes, Sakura and Shikamaru managed to figure out what none of the others could, that the letters were fake. Apparently, the other shinobi were either too dense or preoccupied with heartfelt desire to even think to do the obvious thing, ask or thank the other person about the notes. So Sakura began, tapping a finger on her lip and thought, if the letters are fake, who sent them? Shikamaru replied, there is a high probability that it was the Hokage-sama. She has the most motive in this case. I guess. Sakura scrunched up her face and looked up at the ceiling as she processed this, but why? Why would she trick us and use our lists for such a purpose? Shikamaru made a noise of agreement as he closed his eyes again and thought, it doesn't make any sense the way she went about it. It was very illogical to attempt to get pairs of ninjas to mate based on those lists. Sakura propped her elbows on her knees, letting her chin rest on her hands as she listened to Shikamaru talk. It would have made more sense to pair us up by our specific strengths and traits in order to make the next generation of ninja more powerful. Strengthening the defense of Konoha and making the next generation is the point of this mission, after all. Yeah. Sakura sighed, beginning to get bummed out at the realization that it wasn't Sasuke that sent her that note. For example, Shikamaru continued, it doesn't make any sense for Sasuke to mate with you or Ino logically, he should breed with Hinata due to their powerful bloodline traits of the Sharingan and Byakugan. At that, Sakura's eyes flew wide open, her eyebrow twitching involuntarily as several blood vessels bulged out of her forehead in anger. Then, Tenten, with her strength and weaponry ninjutsu, should probably breed with Lee due to his strength and taijutsu, coupled with his speed. At the mention of Lee, a vision of pretty flowers popped into Sakura's head, causing her to calm down if just a little bit. Then Ino, not having any specific special qualities, could theoretically breed with whoever is left. Huh. Sakura snorted, now having all but forgotten Shikamaru's comment about Sasuke, Ino's not special. Huh. There was a short pause as Shikamaru tilted his head up slightly to look at the pink-haired ninja. And lastly, you, Sakura, easily being the most intelligent of the female genins and most of the men as well, should logically breed with me. Due to my high IQ, there would be a high chance our children would be extremely intelligent, as well as being very capable ninjas. You think I'm smart? Sakura stuttered as a blush ran across her face. Shikamaru nodded. Sakura smiled. That was one hell of a pickup line. Chapter 16, To Be Wanted. After sending Orochimaru that letter, or so he thought, Sasuke figured that it would take a while for Orochimaru to get to Konoha. Therefore, Sasuke decided to just hide himself in his room until then. After Sakura and Ino, he guessed that it would be a while before more women came a-knockin'. Boy, was he surprised. Sasuke stared at the letter in disbelief. Why would she send me a note? Wait, the Uchiha thought aloud as he read further. Wait, no, she just wants to talk? Sasuke blinked in confusion as he sat on his bed. Well, I guess I don't have anything to fear from her. After all, out of all the female genin, she is the most non-psychotic. Tenten sighed. Later, when Sasuke heard the dreaded knock at his door, he was at first filled with fear due to the trauma he suffered at the hands of Ino, although getting traumatized was the story of his life. Come in, he said slowly. Hi. Tenten said happily as she bounded in. So what do you want to talk about? The Uchiha asked her as she had a seat. Oh, she said casually as she glanced around his room, you can go first. Sasuke was caught off guard slightly, while Tenten looked at him and smiled. I thought you liked the Hyuga. Sasuke stated. Oh, I do love Neji, Tenten grinned, although Neji loves himself. Sasuke's sweat dropped. Tenten went over and whispered into Sasuke's ear, he plays with his hair far too much. Sasuke relaxed a bit, I bet he has posters of himself in his room. She giggled, he does. You know, Sasuke said to Tenten slowly, it's really fascinating to be able to actually talk to a female that isn't trying to jump me. Well, Tenten replied thoughtfully, tapping a finger to her lips, if you're really having that much trouble, I know of a way you could probably get them to leave you alone for a few years until you're ready for them. How? Sasuke got up in her face in desperate anticipation. She grinned, you could pretend you like boys? Sasuke's eyebrow twitched as his pupils went wide. Sasuke's dream sequence, Sasuke jumped in front of Itachi and Kisame. They stared at him curiously. I like boys! Sasuke exclaimed triumphantly, with his hands on his hips. After a few moments of his lips quivering, Itachi burst out laughing until he fell to the ground and died again. Sasuke blinked. Kisame looked down at Itachi and burst out crying as he ran off with his head in his hands. I thought we had something special. Zombie Itachi sat up, wait what? End dream sequence, Sasuke shook his head violently to get the images out of his head, while at the same time trying not to go into another hyperventilating fit. No. Sasuke said quickly to Tenten, I'd rather get it on with Sakura and Ino at the same time than go through that. I'd rather just revive my clan now. He breathed. Okay. Tenten continued, so what's the holdup? A slight blush ran across Sasuke's face, I'm not sure how to go about it. Tenten grinned as she thought of something. I have something that can help you, she said slyly, coming closer to him. Sasuke gulped as she got up in his face. He watched as she reached behind her back. This! She suddenly exclaimed, handing him an object. The Uchiha blinked as he looked at it. A video? Tenten smiled and gave him a thumbs up reminiscent of her teammate, Lee. Not just any video, she continued, an educational video. Sasuke blinked. You watch that, and I'm sure you'll be able to revive your clan real quick. She smirked, tilting her head as she walked toward the door. Sasuke's mouth hung open as he watched her leave. Bye, she called out as she was halfway out the door, I'm gonna run over to Niji's house to see if I can catch him undressing. Sasuke stared at the video as his mind processed what all just happened. A few moments later, He had put the video on the TV, the exact same video that Tenten had borrowed from Ino for Niji to watch. At first, Sasuke grimaced at the images dancing on the screen, wide-eyed in shock. But then, with newfound determination, he activated his Sharingan eyes. Sasuke watched the video several times, making sure that he memorized all the techniques on the screen. Hinata sat at her desk and wrote in her diary as she reflected on her date with Kiba. She smiled. She had actually had a good time. They had gone out to eat and had a nice meal. Kiba had only left a few minutes ago and Hinata peeped as she looked over by the door. Kiba forgot his jacket. She got up from her desk and walked over to Kiba's jacket, picking it up. Oh, she said sadly, I hope he doesn't get cold. Hinata stared at the soft jacket for a few moments and thought, I've got to return it to him, she said, as she rushed out the door. Hinata walked down the darkened streets of Konoha. The lights from the stores and restaurants flickered across her. As she passed by a familiar ramen place, she paused. Glancing down a dark alleyway, she gasped, Naruto? Hinata grasped her hands close to her chest as she approached his unconscious form. Oh! She breathed sheepishly as she squatted down and looked him over, watching his chest rise and fall as he snored slightly. Her heart fluttered as she reached out and nudged his orange jacket. Naruto? She said quietly. When he didn't wake up, she poked him a few more times, a blush spreading across her face. The only response Naruto offered was a louder snore. Hinata's lips quivered in thought as she stood up and looked around while glancing back at his form. She blinked as her eye twitched slightly. This might be my only chance, Hinata thought to herself as she nervously clutched Kiba's jacket tighter. Suddenly, she turned and ran out back into the main street and looked around to see if anyone was watching or if anyone would see. Hinata frowned slightly when she noticed a few people walking about. No, she said sadly, before she noticed something in the store window across the street. They were colorful animal masks usually sold to children during festivals. Hinata's eyes lit up as she smiled, rushing over to buy a mask from the festival shop. She picked out a small orange mask of a fox and held out her money to the shopkeeper who was just about to close the store for the night. Then, having left the shop, she immediately slipped off into the dark shadows and put the fox mask on her face. Sure, it was a little too small for her, but it would serve its purpose. She would just die if anyone were to find out about what she was about to do. Stealthily, the mask obscuring her face, Hinata appeared at Naruto's side, carefully slinging his unconscious form onto her back before she took to the roofs, sprinting back in the direction of her house. Kiba would have to get his jacket back another day. Asuma and Kurenai were also walking the streets of Konoha that night. Just as Asuma had opened his mouth to say something to Kurenai, Guy suddenly appeared in front of them. Hey! Guy exclaimed, his teeth sparkling. Guy? Kurenai blinked. We didn't think we'd see you anytime soon since Anko got a hold of you. Guy looked confused. What do you mean? Well, we saw her basically drag you off the other day at the restaurant. Asuma replied. Guy grinned, rubbing his chin with his hand as he spoke. Oh, yes, that's right. She took me to her place because she said she wanted to have some fun with me. Asuma raised an eyebrow. So then she said I could pick what to do first, and I chose a poetry reading on the nature of the youthful ninja and the blossoming seeds of the lotus. Guy continued, strangely, after about an hour she told me to go home because she had to wash her hair and sharpen her ninja weapons. Kurenai's mouth hung open slightly. Guy scratched his head. I have gone back over several times, but she always seems to be in the shower. He had a faraway look in his eyes as he walked off. Asuma and Kurenai shot each other a glance. Several minutes later, Anko nearly ran into them. What's the deal? Asuma asked, glancing behind Anko to see a certain green suit wearing Jounin in the far distance sprinting back towards them. Anko sighed, Guy just won't shut up. It's constant. He won't stop talking. It's always youthfulness this and lotus blossom that. Plus, he's always too damn happy. So, you're avoiding him? Asuma said, taking a puff on his cigarette. Yeah, Anko said slowly as she began to look Asuma up and down. Hey, how about you and I mine? Kurenai said quickly, grasping Asuma's arm tightly and narrowing her eyes at Anko. Anko gave the pair a vaguely disappointed look. Why don't you just get back with Kakashi? Asuma asked. I can't find him. What about Iruka? He's really good at hiding. Anko narrowed her eyes and looked at the ground. Kurenai looked at her fellow kunoichi and felt a little sorry for her. Hey, Kurenai began, if you still want to get a hold of Guy, I've got a great idea. Asuma watched as Kurenai dug through her satchel and pulled out what can only be described as the ninja equivalent of handcuffs along with what looked like a long piece of cloth. Anko raised an eyebrow, before grinning slightly and taking the items from Kurenai. I'm guessing you do know what to do with those, right? Kurenai said playfully. Yep, Anko replied with enthusiasm. First thing I'll do is tie this cloth around his constantly flapping mouth. Thanks! Kurenai nodded as Anko ran off in the direction that guy was, yelling, sweet, sweet silence and hot sexy body, here I come. After Anko was gone, Asuma looked at Kurenai curiously. I didn't know you had those. Well, I was saving it for a special occasion. Temari yawned as she walked down the street. The sun had just risen a few hours ago and it was a new day. As she passed a ramen stand and rounded a corner into an alleyway, she was met with a strange sight. What the, she said wide-eyed, walking closer. Hey kid! Temari said, kicking the snoring figure's foot slightly, wake up! Naruto snorted slightly as he groggily awoke to find Temari standing over him. What happened? Naruto sat up and mumbled. Why am I naked? Naruto blinked as this information set in. Where the heck are my pants? Having stealthily replaced her conquest back where she found him, Hinata snuggled against the memoirs of her quarry one Naruto Uzumaki's pants, not to mention his undies. Chapter 17, Dreams and Things. Temari looked down at Naruto and smirked. Must be cold out. Ah! Naruto exclaimed as he quickly covered himself with his hands. The blonde sand ninja put her hands on her hips as she watched Naruto's pitiful attempts to stand up without being able to move his hands. So what happened to you? She said with curiosity as she grabbed him by his jacket and helped pull him up. Well, Naruto scrunched up his face as he thought about it. I'm not sure, but all I remembered is this really strange dream that there was this fox, and it was licking me. Temari raised an eyebrow as she listened. Plus I was a fox too, and Naruto had a faraway look in his eyes. Right. Temari said slowly, theorizing that Naruto must have been dropped on his head many times as a child. There was a long pause. I really need some pants, Naruto said, staring at Temari. She blinked. Well, don't look at me. Naruto's mouth quivered. Don't you have anything that I could cover up with? Temari crossed her arms and tapped her foot in thought before she glanced up at Naruto and walked over to him. Hey, wait, where are you? Naruto complained as she snatched his forehead protector off of his head. She smirked. That won't be able to cover up there, Temari said, stepping back. Naruto blinked, dumbfounded. His forehead protector was now protecting something else entirely. Shikamaru and Sakura were walking together down the street, when suddenly they were met face to face with two certain blondes exiting from a dark alley. Sakura stared at Naruto. Temari stared at Shikamaru. Oh my god! What the hell? Sakura screamed as she pointed at Naruto's makeshift covering. Why is he naked? Shikamaru addressed Temari, raising an eyebrow. Temari glanced at Sakura before addressing Shikamaru. Why are you with her? Saw Sakura? Naruto's eyes went big as she pointed at him. Temari and Shikamaru turned to look at him. Naruto took a step closer only for his head protector to come undone and fall to his feet. I did not need to see that. Ever. Shikamaru said flatly. I guess I didn't tie it tight enough. Temari shrugged. Naruto! Sakura gasped, covering her eyes. You streaker. Naruto's lips quivered as he picked the cloth back up and put it where it was a few moments earlier, being sure to tie it much tighter this time. Once Naruto was semi-adequately covered up once again, he took off home to get a pair of pants, leaving Shikamaru, Sakura, and Temari to stare at each other. Come on, Shikamaru, Sakura pulled on his arm, we gotta go. Where are you two going? Temari wondered aloud. We're going to confront the Hokage about her fake letter writing, Sakura said excitedly, shaking her fist in the air. Huh? Temari's sweat dropped. What are you talking about? Sakura blinked. I guess you wouldn't know, she said slowly. It's so troublesome. Shikamaru sighed. The Hokage went and sent out all these fake love notes to and from various people, all based on these troublesome lists we had to fill out. In summary, she tricked us all. What? Temari blinked, reaching through her pocket. You don't mean blank lists like these, do you? She said, holding up the surveys that Tsunade had requested the sand fill out. Shikamaru looked at the papers and nodded, as did Sakura. I can't believe I actually almost filled these out, exclaimed. Sakura turned to Shikamaru. Maybe she should come with us. Shikamaru mumbled as he stared up at the clouds as they rolled by. You two can go. I'll just stay here, and Shikamaru's sweat dropped as he was interrupted by Temari grabbing him by one arm and Sakura getting him by the other, dragging him in the direction of Tsunade's office. Lee was happily strolling along this sunny morning when suddenly he felt his foot bump something. He looked down to see a little black book just lying in the street. "Oh!" Lee exclaimed with growing curiosity as he picked it up and began to flip through what was unbeknownst to him actually Jiraiya's personal book of pickup lines that had fallen from Naruto's grasp when he was laid out by Ino's fist. Lee hummed as he read several lines. This poetry could really use some work. And with that, he whipped out a writing utensil, and with some red ink he began to do the person a big favor and make it better. Lee was so absorbed with his poetry editing as he walked along that he wasn't watching where he was going. This resulted in him bumping into Guy. "Lee!" Guy smiled, slapping a hand onto his student's shoulder. "Guy-sensei." Lee grinned, tucking the book under his arm so he could concentrate on his teacher. The green Jounin smiled really big. "Congratulate your sensei, Lee." Guy exclaimed, "For today I have made it with a woman." He struck a triumphant pose. "Yay! Guy-sensei!" Lee yelled excitedly, clapping. There was a pause. Lee blinked. "Made what?" Guy stared at his student. How shall I put this, he thought quickly. "I have spread my seeds of youthfulness." Guy exclaimed, striking a different pose. "Yay! Guy-sensei!" Lee grinned and clapped even louder, not that he understood any better. "What?" Jiraiya exclaimed, having heard this information in earshot. "Even you have gotten laid?" he said in disbelief, walking over to Guy and Lee. Dramatic tears welled up in Jiraiya's eyes. "This isn't fair." He mumbled off to himself. Jiraiya was just about to walk off before he happened to spot what Lee was holding. "Ack!" Jiraiya exclaimed, slapping his hands against the sides of his head in distress. "What are you doing with my book?" Lee blinked as the white-haired man grabbed the book out of his hands. Jiraiya's jaw dropped as he flipped through his pickup lines, seeing nothing but red ink. "Boy!" Jiraiya grimaced. "What have you done?" Lee smiled really big. "I made it better," he said, shooting Jiraiya a thumbs up. Jiraiya twitched uncontrollably as tears streamed down his face. Over in the Hokage's office, Tsunade had just sat down at her desk to begin a fourth round of letter writing when she heard some hurried knocks at her door. "Yes?" Tsunade said slowly, raising an eyebrow. A moment later, Shizen ran in through the door, sweat dropping. She said, appearing before the Hokage, pointing over at the three young ninjas rushing into the room. "Hokage-sama!" Temari exclaimed, slapping a hand on the desk. "We know about the letters," Sakura continued, pointing accusingly at Tsunade. "Well, shit," Tsunade thought to herself as she observed the agitated shinobis before her. "I didn't think they would figure it out so quickly." The Hokage sighed as she mentally sorted through her options for explaining her actions. Option 1, blame it all on Jiraiya. Option 2, blame it all on Jiraiya. Option 3, pretend that this was some elaborate test of ninja skills to see who could figure out the hoax first. Tsunade glanced up at Shikamaru and Sakura and put on a big fake smile. "Congratulations." The Hokage grinned. "You figured it out." "Eh?" Shikamaru, Sakura, Temari, and Shizen exclaimed in confusion. "Yeah," Tsunade quickly dug through her desk, "and here's what you win." "Huh? You get to go up a ninja rank." Tsunade continued as she looked for something in her desk. "I get to be a chunin?" Sakura asked slowly, in disbelief. "Oh, no, Tsunade said slyly, pulling out a colorful ribbon and quickly tacking it to Sakura. "Here, you get to be a genin and a half." "Eh?" Sakura nearly fell over. "And you get to be a chunin and a half," she said, pinning a random ribbon onto Shikamaru's chunin vest. The chunin and a half gave the Hokage a skeptical look. "And you," Tsunade said, handing something to Temari, "you get a coupon for 20% off your next purchase at Konoha's Ninja Weapons R Us." And so, Tsunade was forced to stop the letter writing. With no more letters going out, the shinobi of Konoha were left up to their own devices for about 2 weeks, all the way up to the day before the second month mark. Kakashi yawned as he stretched his legs off the side of his bed. He smiled as he pushed the covers off of him as he sat up. Lately, he had been sleeping really well, not only because the Umbu women had curiously been disrupting his sleep less and less, but also because his nightly dreams were filled with visions of his time with them. There were some really good dreams. What shall I do today? He wondered as he got up and glanced about his room. His eyes met a certain orange book lying on his desk table. Ah, yes. The copy-nin smiled, clapping playfully as he went over and sat down to read his favorite book. It was strange. It had been a long while since he had gotten the chance to read Come Paradise, and as his eye glanced over the pages he began to realize that what he had lived through this past month was far juicier than anything he could read in this book. Kakashi sighed and scratched his head. Oh, what could he do? I wonder when the next volume comes out, he wondered. flipping to the end of the book, looking to see if there was an ad or something that told. But something else caught his eye. Letters to the editor? The copy ninja questioned as he read the page. If you have an interesting tale you think would make a great inspiration to the next volume of the Paradise series, please send your story to this address. Kakashi grew excited over the idea that a story in his favorite book might get written based on his life experiences. And so, he pulled out some paper and began to write. Of course, the letters to the editor was really just letters to the author, aka Jiraiya. Reading Kakashi's letter would give Jiraiya the nosebleed of his life. Meanwhile, over in the Hokage's office, Tsunade called out, "Have all the women reported in?" "Yes, for the most part." "Did you use the pregnancy test no jutsu?" "Yes." "And?" 99% of the Umbu women are pregnant. Tsunade blinked. Could have just said 99% of the Umbu are pregnant. The men are going to get pregnant too. Oh yeah. What about the rest of the kunoichi? And the villagers? Tsunade asked. Shizen said slowly, 3%. Only 3%? The Hokage exclaimed, jumping up from her desk. As Shizen's sweat dropped. Shizen! Tsunade called out, pointing at her assistant, call a meeting. Get all the male ninjas butts in here right now. A short time later, Tsunade found herself staring down the large group of Genin, Chunin, and Jounin men. Several of them were fidgeting slightly. Others were sweating. But many of them looked nervous not only because they had no clue why they were summoned so suddenly, but also because they knew that today was the very last day of the first month. There was a long drawn-out pause before the Hokage's voice broke the silence. What have you guys been doing? Tsunade exclaimed, each other? Chapter 18, Neki Ninjas. The male's ninjas blinked dumbfounded at Tsunade's outburst. I mean seriously, Tsunade continued, staring them down, is it really that hard for you all to get laid? The Hokage paused for a moment and thought. Or perhaps, Tsunade said slyly, it's because it's not so hard that's the problem? Several males in the crowd gaped and moved their lips up and down as though they desperately wished to comment and offer something in their defense, but no words were coming out. Let's be truthful now, Tsunade continued, tapping her fingers on her desk, raise your hand if you've been a good ninja and have done some procreating this month. For most, it was not a hard decision to thrust up their hand into the air. Tsunade grunted in annoyance as she watched every single adult there raise their hand as well as a few of the younger ones. Jiraiya, she called out, rolling her eyes, put your hand down, nobody's buying it. Jiraiya grumbled and crossed his arms, turning to stare at the wall. Tsunade glared at the men skeptically, carefully judging the emotions on their faces to see if she could see hints of who was not being truthful. Well, the Hokage sighed, I know Jiraiya was lying but I'm not sure about the rest of you. There were a few gulps in the audience, as well as fidgeting about as several decided to stop the charade and lower their hands. Kakashi had to personally shove his two students' hands in their pockets. He thought he knew them better than that. Although, in Naruto's case his assumption was actually slightly inaccurate, not that Naruto knew of this fact. Why are you guys having trouble finding a hookup? Tsunade continued slowly, I mean you all are good, look well, pretty, attractive, fairly decent, moderately adequate, well you're not ugly. They all blinked. That was directed at me, wasn't it? Yelled an accusing voice. Shut up, Jiraiya. Tsunade said flatly, gritting her teeth in growing annoyance. There was a long pause, as Tsunade began to sift through her papers on her desk, thinking up what she would scold them about next. And, the men who all still had their hands up slowly lowered them. They were getting a little tired after all. As the Hokage rested her elbows on her desk and entwined her fingers, her eyes settled on Guy, out of all the ninja. This was mostly because he just stood out with those crazy green tights and all. Wait, that's it! Tsunade suddenly exclaimed, jolting several of the men awake. I think I know what is wrong with you guys. She smiled, for example, Guy, would you step forward? Immediately, Hokage-sama. Guy exclaimed enthusiastically, hopping to the front. Kakashi raised an eyebrow at this turn of events. You see this guy, here, Tsunade gestured to Guy, you don't want to be like this guy, huh? Guy blinked. Those green tights are so tight that they're probably squishing his balls together so much that all of his sperm are, for the lack of a better term, permanently brain dead. Eh? Came a resounding yell from the crowd of men. In other words, Tsunade continued, his little swimmers aren't swimming anywhere anytime soon. The green Jounin twitched slightly, at a loss at what he was hearing. And as I look at you all, Tsunade grinned slyly, I surmise, through many of your similar styles of attire, that this is a common problem. Many worried looks crossed the faces of the male shinobi as nearly all of them, as if on cue, glanced down at their groin in curiosity, wondering if in fact, their pants were too tight. As this went on, Naruto had a question pop into his mind. Now, Naruto remembered what happened the last time he asked someone something, so this time he wanted to be sure to pick the right person to ask. He looked over at Kakashi-sensei. No thought. Tsunade? Hell, no. He didn't want to see any of those pictures from either of those books again. In all his naivete as well as lingering effects from that blow in the head that Ino gave him a while back, he decided for some reason that it would be intelligent to ask Jiraiya, of all people. Eros and Nin? Naruto asked Jiraiya, what's a sperm? Jiraiya flinched, turning his head slowly toward the blonde genin. You cannot be serious. He stated in total disbelief. Naruto scrunched up his face and nodded. I really want to know. Naruto pleaded, I mean, I get the idea, but I don't understand completely. Jiraiya's mouth hung open as he tried to think of what to say. After a few moments, he thought of something better. Instead of explaining, Jiraiya grinned, I'll just show you. Naruto, filled with curiosity, watched as Jiraiya performed his summoning technique. Poof! There you go. The white-haired man said, pointing at the tadpole he had just summoned, it's pretty much like that. Whoa! Naruto exclaimed wide-eyed, something that huge is gonna come flying at my. Jiraiya slapped a hand over Naruto's mouth, not wanting the boy to embarrass himself further. A few minutes later, one last thing, the Hokage began, before I conclude this meeting, I want to remind everyone what day tomorrow is. There were several looks of horror among the male shinobi. Starting tomorrow, the second month of this mission begins. Tsunade said firmly, glaring them down, by law, no male ninja will be allowed to wear any sort of clothing or material above their waist, including the forehead protectors. You'll have to just tie them elsewhere. Kakashi started sweating slightly. And since the female Umbu have already completed their mission like true loyal Konoha ninjas, they will be out on patrol. Tsunade slowly said with a stern and serious tone, if they spot even one of you with your shirt on, they have orders to rip it off of you. Understand? The men nodded quickly and repeatedly, rushing out the door as Tsunade concluded the meeting. They wanted to make the most of their final hours of being attached to their shirts. The Hokage sighed as she leaned back in her chair and propped her feet up on the desk. Maybe this will finally get some results soon. All the ninjas had excited the Hokage's office except for a certain copy Nin. Kakashi approached the Hokage's desk, his hands in his pockets. What is it? Tsunade glanced up at him. Don't even think of begging to be allowed to wear that mask of yours, Tomer. Suddenly she heard the clanging of coins on her desk as Kakashi dropped some change in front of her that he had just fished from his pocket. I just had this spare change, he said casually, and I thought I might as well drop it in as a bet in that pool of yours. Tsunade blinked at Kakashi in mild surprise. Which one? She said, picking up the coins. The second. Who are you betting on? Kakashi scratched his head sheepishly. Myself. Kakashi had just whipped out his Paradise book to read as he exited the Hokage's office, when he found Guy waiting for him in the hallway. Just how many blossoms of youth have you deflowered? Guy questioned with exuberance, getting up in Kakashi's face. Kakashi's sweat dropped as he attempted to ignore Guy. Tell me, my eternal rival. Guy exclaimed, jumping about, I must know. Kakashi sighed, putting his book under his arm so that he could count it up on his fingers. Guy watched in amazement as his rival went through one hand, then the other, followed by the first hand again. Guy's eyes went wide in awe. No wait, that's not right. Kakashi suddenly mumbled, starting the counting over. Guy's jaw dropped. Kakashi just casually kept on counting. Alas, my eternal rival. Guy declared all teary-eyed, you may have me beaten so far, but there is still time left. Kakashi got lost counting and had to start over again, totally oblivious to Guy's blabbing. I shall defeat you. Guy exclaimed before taking off. Kakashi was still counting. And so, the sun set and rose again, signaling the day that so many a male Konoha ninja dreaded. A certain Jounin found himself walking down the street, much to his discomfort. In fact, he felt quite naked. The streets were quiet for the most part now, except for the watchful eyes of Umbu women on the rooftops. As he walked along, several women popped their heads out of the stores, houses, and restaurants that he passed by. Hi, a woman called out to him, waving. Hi, another popped up in a window, grinning sexily. Kakashi's sweat dropped and started walking a little faster, shrinking his muscular arms up closer to his pale shirtless chest. He was reading his orange book as usual. Well, actually, he had his book so far up in his face, covering his nose and mouth, that there was no way he could possibly be actually reading the thing. Kakashi's nose twitched in discomfort and his lips quivered nervously. He didn't have on his precious mask, he wasn't allowed to. Kakashi couldn't remember the last time he walked out in public without that thing on his face. The fact that he couldn't wear a shirt either was also not helping his state of heightened self-consciousness. "Hi." Several more women drawled out as the copy ninja walked past. Kakashi just didn't know how to cope with all the attention. Another female hopped closer to him, purring in a sing-song tone. "Hi. Hi." The young girl at the ramen stand screamed as Kakashi moved one of his hands to adjust his pants slightly as they were starting to fall off. Kakashi's sweat dropped, suddenly realizing that this was a particularly bad day to chose to start taking Tsunade's advice about not wearing tight pants. Suddenly, two girls standing in front of a bookstore started whistling at him in a suggestive manner. "Why don't you lower that book where we can see your face?" yelled a random kunoichi. As the copy nin picked up his pace once again, he happened to notice several seething, jealous glares that the female ANBUs on the roof were shooting various women as he received several more high whistles, and a baby, take it all off. After several minutes, Kakashi heard a certain male voice. "Greetings, my eternal rival." Guy yelled enthusiastically, jumping in front of the copy nin's path. There was a long pause as Kakashi looked at Guy and blinked. "Guy," Kakashi asked slowly, "why are you naked?" Guy was, in fact, standing in front of Kakashi with no clothes on. "At all. I'm going to win the challenge," Guy exclaimed, gesturing at his nakedness as though it were not obvious enough, "and this will get me more women, faster. Plus the fact that my green tights are a one-piece outfit and I don't own any separate pants or underwear." Guy added quickly. The women in the background that had been following Kakashi around were now making horrendous faces and fainting all over the place, all thanks to a certain nude jounin. Kakashi grimaced, lifting his book up to cover his eyes as well. Chapter 19, What Lies Underneath. Shizen and Genma were snuggled up in bed together asleep when the light came on them, signaling the first of the shirtless days. Not that Genma had any shirt on at the moment to remove. In fact, Genma was completely nude save for one thing, that bandana that he wore on his head. Shizen stirred and stared at her companion in odd fascination as she watched him snore. She often wondered why he insisted on always wearing that thing even in his sleep. Suddenly she noticed the clock and the time. Her eyes went wide as she gently kicked Genma in the side. "Get up!" she exclaimed. "I've got to get to the Hokage's office." He complained as he got up and started putting his clothes back on. Shizen was already dressed and waiting by the door by the time Genma sleepily walked outside, bringing a shirt with him that he was just about to pull over his head. Shizen quickly pulled it away from him. "You won't be needing that today, remember?" she reminded him. "Oh right," he said slowly, throwing his shirt back inside as Shizen closed the door. As Genma was about to leave, Shizen suddenly thought of something. "Hey, you have to take that thing off too," she reminded Genma, pointing at his head. "You can't wear that." Genma's eyes went wide as Shizen simply grabbed it off of his head. Shizen gasped as she suddenly found herself blinded by a bright light. It was a glare coming from the top of Genma's head. "No!" he whined, quickly attempting to cover the rather large bald spot in the middle of his head. Shizen blinked, dumbfounded with surprise. "You're balding?" Genma pouted. Shizen quickly turned away from him, trying to hide her urge to giggle. "Shizen? I'm sorry, but I cannot allow my future children to end up bald." She sighed, smiling slyly. "I guess I'll just have to find a new lover." With that, Shizen took off to the Hokage's office. "Shizen! Don't leave me!" Genma called out in distress, taking off after her. Shizen grinned. It's fun to make them sweat. Many of the female ninjas, as well as the villagers, were pretty surprised when they woke up to go about their day to find every guy in Konoha walking around half naked. Only the Umbu and the male shinobi themselves had been informed about it forcibly, no less. Ino and Sakura were in awe, walking down the street with lit-up eyes, ogling all the new and interesting sights. For a moment, just a moment, they forgot all about Sasuke. "Is that Iruka-sensei?" Sakura exclaimed as she spotted the teacher down the street. "Oh my god!" Ino laughed. "He looks absolutely horrified." Iruka was attempting to purchase something from the food stand, but the saleswoman wouldn't stop staring at his chest. Even from there, the girls could spot the red spreading across his face. Sakura giggled. Of course, not all the sights were created equal. A certain white-haired porn novelist was strolling in the direction of Ino and Sakura. Both the girls commented mentally. Just then, 3 kids sped past them, nearly knocking Sakura over. As the first 2 sped onward, Konohamaru paused and snorted at Jiraiya. "Huh. Man boobs." He laughed, pointing at the perverted hermit before running off. Sakura stifled a laugh. Jiraiya's eye twitched. As she and Ino passed him, Ino paused and raised an eyebrow at the perverted hermit before continuing on her way. "You've really let yourself go these past few weeks, huh, Jiraiya?" a voice said in a playful and amused tone. Jiraiya spun around. It was Tsunade. Naruto sat in his room, unsure of what to do. Before him was a near-empty closet containing a single outfit, or, more precisely, one half of an outfit. He had the top to his orange jumpsuit, but not the pants. He still didn't know where they were or what had become of them. And so, he was left to sit in his underpants and stare at a top that he could not wear and wonder about the location of the pants that he could not find. For a moment, he wondered if it would be okay to go out to eat ramen in nothing but his underwear. Hell, he'd go eat ramen naked if necessary. Luckily, Naruto eventually remembered that he had some black swim pants that he could wear the same shorts that he had ended up hastily putting on when his other pants disappeared. With that thought, he tied his Konoha headband around his waist, located his shorts, and sprinted out the door, curious to see what everyone else was up to. Ino and Sakura were admiring some flowers in a window when Tenten along with Niji walked up. She had him by the hand, pulling him along. "Hey! Sakura, Ino!" Tenten called out, waving exuberantly. Sakura's face lit up. "Oh, hey Tenten." Ino looked over at Niji and grinned. "I see you've finally gotten all of that stuff out of your hair," she said in a teasing manner. Niji flinched at the memory, grumbling under his breath. Tenten laughed nervously, letting go of Niji's hand to bring up an arm to scratch her head. Niji snorted slightly, crossing his arms against his bare chest. Sakura's sweat dropped, deciding that maybe she should change the subject. Hey, she began, turning her head to Ino and Tenten, "have you seen Hinata, today? Do you know where she is?" Ino shrugged. Tenten tapped her finger to her lip and thought, "Now that I think about it, I haven't seen her in quite a while." Hinata sighed happily as she paused from making her bed, taking a moment to look up at the orange pants that she had affixed to her wall like a trophy. "Naruto," she breathed, clutching her hands to her chest. "Hinata!" She heard her father call from downstairs. Hinata gasped, quickly covering the missing half of Naruto's jumpsuit with some curtains. "Coming!" she replied. Meanwhile, the moments passed slowly for Kakashi, as Guy continued to just stand there without any clothes on. Luckily for Kakashi, some of his Umbu acquaintances were about to come to his rescue. Suddenly half a dozen female Umbu jumped down from the roof right in between Kakashi and Guy. Two of them grasped the nude Jounin firmly by the arms. "Mato Guy, you are under arrest for indecent exposure," one Umbu said forcefully. "Cover yourself immediately." Kakashi cautiously and ever so slowly peered from behind his orange book, giving a sigh of relief. Just as they were about to haul Guy away, poor innocent Lee just happened to walk by in time to witness the horrific scene. "Guy-sensei." Lee blinked as he spotted his teacher. They all turned to look at the genin in the green shorts. "Guy-sensei is naked," Lee stated loudly. A look of concern crossed Guy's face as he looked at his student, but before Guy could even open his mouth to speak, Lee's mouth had formed an O shape as though a light bulb had just gone off in his head. "Oh!" Lee exclaimed enthusiastically, "I get it now." Guy blinked in surprise. "Nakedness must enhance the power of youth in some way, Guy-sensei." Lee continued, "I shall immediately unleash this power to further my training." Before Guy had a chance to tell him otherwise, Lee had stripped off his pants and taken off down the street, whooping exuberantly. "Hoo-oh-oh!" A few moments later, Sakura and Ino turned to look as Lee minus his green outfit streaked past yelling loudly. "Behold the power of youth!" was all he caught as he ran past and out of sight, leaving a path of various villagers and shinobi with odd looks on their faces. "Was that Lee?" Sakura said slowly as her brain attempted to process what she had just witnessed. "I think so." Ino raised an eyebrow. "Oh God," Sakura said with exasperation, putting her head in her hands, embarrassed for Lee. Ino blinked as she happened to glance over at Niji. He looked as though he was about to hurl. Unfortunately for Niji, he had his Byakugan activated in order to look through the clothes of a rather large-breasted kunoichi across the street. Consequently, when Lee had run past Thymish, Niji cried in his thoughts, "It's burned into my mind." On the other hand, Tenten had walked out into the middle of the street as Lee had passed, turning her head to get a better view. "Huh," she said with growing interest. "Lee's got a real nice body. I can't believe I never noticed that before him," Tenten hummed, glancing over at Niji and tapping her foot in thought. She looked Niji over up and down. Then, she glanced back over in the direction that Lee had gone. Then at Niji again, and then back at Lee. Surprisingly pale, pasty, and scrawny looking without his shirt on or tan and muscular. Tenten went back and forth mentally. Pale and scrawny, tan and muscular, pale and scrawny, tan and muscular, pale and scrawny? Tan and muscular. Tenten suddenly yelled, having made up her mind. Wait up, Lee. Niji shook himself out of his haze as he saw Tenten suddenly take off down the street in the direction that the streaking Lee had headed. A look of confusion passed over Niji's face. Tenten? Tenten? Niji looked like a little lost puppy as he slowly wandered after her. Sakura and Ino shot each other a questioning glance at what had just happened. Wow. Ino commented, I've never seen Niji show such interest in Tenten. Yeah. Sakura agreed, nodding. There was a long pause. Suddenly something occurred to Ino. Hey, Sakura, Ino said slowly, a large grin forming on her face, I just got a great idea. Huh? Sakura blinked. Ino suddenly thrust her hand out in front of Sakura. I propose a temporary truce. Ino stated firmly, if we work together I'm certain that we can capture Sasuke. Sakura brought a hand up to her chin and thought. Ino grinned playfully, and I know just the way to go about it. While the girls were busy plotting his downfall, Sasuke was several blocks away, strolling down the street shirtless with his hands thrust into his pockets and a scowl on his face. A young kunoichi glanced at the Uchiha's shoulders as he passed by her. Nice tattoo, she said sexily, eyeing his neck. Sasuke snorted slightly, turning his head away from her. Tattoo, my ass. He mumbled under his breath, covering the curse mark with his hand. Not far away, Naruto happened to run into Kiba and Akamaru. Hey, Kiba! Naruto greeted cheerily. Hey, have you seen Kakashi-sensei anywhere? Naruto asked excitedly, dancing around as though there were ants in his pants. No. Kiba replied, but, that reminds me, have you seen Shino? I've been trying to find him, Naruto said slowly, but, he pointed over behind Kiba, who's that? I haven't seen him before. Kiba turned around to see a guy with his back to him. He watched closely as a tiny black speck crawled along the guy's bare and rather pale back. Kiba blinked. Shino? Kiba asked slowly. Shino? Naruto exclaimed, doing a double take. When Shino heard his name being called, he turned his head to look. That was when Kiba and Naruto suddenly realized that Shino did not have his glasses on, even those were not allowed to be worn. Kiba's jaw dropped. They apparently had been too distracted to even think to look at Shino's eyes the last time that his glasses fell off, because for several minutes Kiba and Naruto could only stare at Shino and blink, wide-eyed. Two tiny black dots blinked back at them. What? Shino asked. He was completely unaware of what was holding their undivided attention. It didn't take long for Tenten to catch up to Lee. She finally found him in the middle of a rather deserted street, having stopped for a breather. Tenten walked up to Lee slowly, taking time to admire his muscles. Hi, Lee! She yelled out in a sing-song tone. Oh, hey Tenten! Lee said, flashing a smile. Tenten hummed playfully, walking around Lee's eyes following her questioningly. Oh, Lee, you're all sweaty, Tenten said slyly. How about you come back to my place and take a shower? Lee thought, Tenten's suggestion seems quite logical. Suddenly, Lee flashed an even bigger smile, giving a thumbs up. That sounds most agreeable. Lee exclaimed loudly to Tenten. Tenten smiled, grabbing Lee by the hand and pulling him in the direction of her house. Chapter 20, Missing Possessions. Come on, Lee. Tenten smiled as she pulled him by the hand in the direction of her house and, more importantly, her shower. Lee smiled widely and picked up his pace. As Tenten watched him, she was struck by an idea. Hey, Lee, how about we race to my house? Tenten said with excitement as she turned to look back at her currently naked teammate. At the mention of a challenge, flames ignited in Lee's eyes. He nodded in agreement and suddenly sprinted in front of Tenten and spun around, running backwards, facing her, sprouting a thumbs up. Tenten grinned and took off after him. After a few minutes she began to fall behind. He's so fast. Tenten thought to herself, I'm glad to see Lee's doing so much better since he got off his crutches. Lee suddenly leapt into the air with joy and shouted, I feel so free and loose with the power of youth. As they arrived at Tenten's house, she was sweating heavily just as she expected. As Lee made his way into the house, it was time to make her move. Oh, Lee, she said slyly, our run made me all sweaty. Now I need a shower too. Lee blinked. How about, Tenten continued, we shower together. It will be more efficient. After a thoughtful pause, Lee replied. You are most wise, Tenten. Lee exclaimed, I never would have thought of that. At that, Tenten grabbed him by the hand, pulling Lee into the bathroom, grinning a playful grin. 5 minutes later, could you pass the soap? Lee asked happily, soaking his hair under the water, not even glancing at Tenten, who was currently behind him with her arms crossed, tapping her finger impatiently against her skin. Oh, Lee. Tenten thought, rolling her eyes, this isn't what I meant by showering together. At least Shikamaru figured out my intentions when we Tenten? Oh. Here Lee Tenten finally handed him the soap, which he then began to use to lather himself. Tenten began to smile. Oh, Lee, in his naivety and innocence, she would have to do something about that. Lee will be Lee. She thought. I'll just have to try another tactic. There was a short pause. So, Lee HM? He blinked. You spoke of nakedness enhancing the power of youth and furthering your training? Yosh. Well, this is your lucky day. Tenten grinned slyly. I've actually practiced this type of training and would love to do it, help you with it. You are most kind. Lee's eyes lit up. An Umbu was jumping roof to roof, speeding along on patrol when she suddenly spotted what appeared to be a male ninja in full clothing. As she approached the male, she noticed his deep, red hair. Halt! The female Umbu said forcefully as she jumped down in front of his path. As she looked up at him, she stated, You are in violation of, but she suddenly went silent as she noticed the symbol on his clothing. Gaara looked into the woman's eyes with a blank expression, though there might have been a tinge of annoyance. Oh. She spoke to herself aloud, You're from the sand. I guess the no-shirt law doesn't apply to you. Gaara crossed his arms. I guess I better check with the Hokage on this. And with that, the Umbu zipped away, and Gaara continued walking to wherever he was going. Meanwhile, Guy had just been hauled off by 2 strong Umbu to wherever one is sent to face whatever appropriate punishment one receives for running around naked. The other few remaining Umbu remained and stared at Kakashi shirtless, half-naked, Kakashi. And they started getting ideas. They grinned at him from behind their animal masks. Hi there. Hello. Kakashi replied casually while at the same time moving his paradise book closer to his face. One Umbu took a step closer to him. Kakashi watched as she tilted her head to the side in a playful manner. Without warning, in a sudden flash, she snatched his little orange book away from his face, leaving the copy nin with empty hands and a semi-startled look. It's against the rules to hide your face, sweetie. The woman said playfully, dangling the book in front of him. Kakashi did not look amused. Give me back my book. Ignoring his plea, she reached up and stroked his bare cheek. Make me. What's going on over there? Sakura asked, turning her head to glance down the street. There were odd sounds of women squealing. From joy? Pain? Let's go see. Ino exclaimed. The female Umbu that had stolen Kakashi's precious book away began to remove her animal mask as she moved in to kiss him. There were many jealous squeals in the background. But before their lips touched, hey, Kakashi said curiously, aren't you Yugal, Hyde's girlfriend? She paused, before backing away, breaking out into sniffles. Oh, Hyde! She cried to the heavens, why did you have to die? You were so good in bed. As Yugal was comforted by another Umbu, Kakashi saw his chance to escape. Time to make my exit, he thought, spinning around, only to come face to face with Sensei? Sakura blinked before her eyes got really wide. Kakashi twitched slightly. Your mask is off. Sakura pointed with her mouth hanging open, your mask is off. Kakashi sighed. Wow, you actually look good. You're not ugly, deformed, have horrible acne, silly lips, funny teeth, foot and mouth disease, horrible scars, burns, boils, or warts. The copy nin blinked. Huh? Suddenly she began to dance around in a circle singing at the top of her lungs, I saw what's under Kakashi-sensei's mask. I saw what's under Kakashi-sensei's mask. Take that, Naruto and Sasuke. I saw it first. Kakashi's sweat dropped. Do they really obsess over me that much? He pondered. Ino watched as Sakura suddenly latched herself onto her teacher's leg. Sakura, Ino commented with a raised eyebrow, your sensei's hot, but not that hot. Sensei. Sakura grinned, looking up at the distressed copy ninja. Suddenly, some other surrounding women took Sakura's lead and grabbed onto his legs. Sensei. One of them mimicked, Sensei. Be my sensei. Another called out. I want him to be my sensei. They chimed. Kakashi looked down and calmly spoke to Sakura, shaking his leg trying to get her loose. Please let go, Sakura, you don't want people thinking your sensei is a pedophile, now, do you? He shook his leg a little harder, but it was difficult with all the other women hanging off of him. Finally, the Umbu stepped in and pulled all the other women off of him and told them to go home. Sakura shook herself off as she was thrown several feet by an Umbu. Sakura looked up at Ino, who was standing over her, tapping her foot with an odd look on her face. I don't know what came over me. Sakura smiled weakly, her face red with embarrassment. We'll have to take you to the Hokage's office now, one of the Umbu women said, stroking Kakashi's face just as Yugao did. Tsunade will want to see you about you trying to obstruct the view of your face in violation of the law. Two of the women grabbed him by the arms as though to take him away, much like Guy, but instead they got distracted by his rippling muscles and began to stroke them. Kakashi sighed. Getting to the Hokage's office might take a while at this rate. If I need to see the Hokage, I would rather just go myself. Kakashi thought to himself, making up his mind to leave the Umbu in the dust. Kakashi thought, as his arms were stroked, if I just poof away and substitute a log in my place, they will probably just come after me again. The copy nin glanced down the street to see a faraway figure. I'll just have to give them something new to play with. And with that, Kakashi poofed away suddenly, leaving a puff of smoke and several whining women in his wake. But, when the smoke cleared, they were surprised to see another man. Instead of a log, Kakashi had substituted Irika from down the street. Irika blinked. Hey, you're pretty cute. The women exclaimed. Huh, what? Irika stuttered nervously. Just then, Anko, who happened at that very moment to be wandering around Konoha looking for a bedmate, walked past and spotted Irika, who was about to be hauled off by some female Umbu for some fun. Irika! Anko yelled at him, I've been trying to find you forever. Irika gulped, Anko. She promptly walked right up to the Umbu. That one's mine. Anko exclaimed to the women holding onto Irika, I challenge you to a battle. After a few moments, they agreed. Rock! Paper! Scissors! Rock! Paper! Scissors! Rock! Paper! Scissors! Damn it! Anko cursed her defeat. Irika cried out as he was dragged off by the victors, Don't I get any say in this? Anko walked away, disappointed, until she looked up and spotted Ibiki walking her way. She paused and looked him up and down. Sure, he was all even scarred up, but as Anko looked at him she thought, that's one rock-hard chunk of man. As Ibiki passed by, Anko growled at him sexily. Ibiki stopped and growled in return. After a few moments of staring at each other, they locked arms and wandered off to do things that you really don't want to hear about. Gaara stared at the large object on the ground, the object that had dared to bump into his foot. He did not know it, but it was a sword that belonged to a certain forgetful, blue Akatsuki member who had run off and left it in a hurry. Kisame made a horrible sound as he sneezed something awful green goo squirting out his gills. Itachi, who was sitting across the room, in the Akatsuki evil lair wherever that was, narrowed his eyes at the outburst as he was taking a nap and was rudely awoken by the noise. Kisame reached behind him to wipe the icky stuff on the cloth that covered his sword as usual, only, when he reached back, he noticed something missing. Where's my sword? In your pants, same as everyone else. No! I mean my sword. Wait, no! I dropped it in Konoha. You've just now noticed? That was 2 weeks ago. Deidara spun around from a corner of the darkly lit room. He was busy making artistic masterpieces, or so he called it. Humph. Real smart there, Kisame. Huh, yeah. I've got to go back and get it. No. Itachi replied flatly. You don't need it, Kisame, said Deidara sarcastically. When you carry around a huge weapon like that, yeah, you are only inviting people to speculate that you are using it to compensate for something. Kisame narrowed his eyes at Deidara, before turning back to Itachi. Please, Itachi, let's go back. No. You just don't want to go back because that dude thought you were a woman. Deidara's ears perked up at that as he spun around again to see what was going on with great interest. Itachi narrowed his eyes. Kisame gulped in realization. As soon as Kisame had said it, he knew he was in for it. Itachi's eyes glowed red. That was unwise. Kisame's world went dark and inverted. He opened his eyes again to find that he was surrounded by water. He spun about and saw an odd, circular container. His view of the outside world was round like a bubble. Kisame looked up to see a menacing sight. A giant Itachi loomed over him, a giant Itachi with large black kitty cat ears. Kisame suddenly looked down at himself in a panic. His legs and arms were missing, replaced with fins. Kisame's eyes went wide, as he breathed. His mouth flapped up and down pitifully like the little blue fishy that he currently was. 72 hours. Itachi's voice boomed. Suddenly, the cat-eared Itachi opened his mouth, revealing huge fangs. 72 hours of being eaten, digested, and Itachi suddenly thrust a clawed paw into Kisame's fishbowl. From Deidara's perspective, Kisame and Itachi stood there and had a staring contest for about 5 minutes before Kisame suddenly tore out of the room, screaming his head off. Itachi casually walked over and had a seat on the couch. Deidara looked over at the Uchiha. "So, what did you do to him this time?" "Well, I could have had him being chopped up into tiny pieces that were subsequently rolled into sushi for 72 hours, but I decided to practice discretion." There was a long pause. "So, Itachi, you got mistaken for a woman?" "Huh, that is a riot, yeah." Deidara grinned in amusement. Itachi narrowed his eyes. He who is in a glass house should not throw shurikens. Deidara blinked. "I thought the saying was should not throw stones," he said with raised eyebrow. Itachi turned his head. "We are ninja. Therefore they are shurikens. Besides, Deidara, you don't have any stones." Chapter 21, Faking It. Out of curiosity, Gaara slowly reached down and picked up Kisame's sword from the ground. It was very heavy, so he willed the sand to come out and help put it on his back. It made quite the visual image when combined with the already present gourd. The two round curves. The long, well, you get the idea. In a short amount of time, Gaara found the sword too heavy and cumbersome and decided to throw it back on the ground, simply making a mental note that he would have to inform the Hokage about the suspicious object later. There could be enemies lurking about. The sand were there to help defend Konoha after all. "Yo!" Kakashi said, poofing into the Hokage's office. The copy ninja looked about only to find it strangely empty. He shrugged. He thought, good, this will give me some time to really think I've let myself go? Jiraiya asked Tsunade in a somewhat pitiful manner as he patted at his chest, finding that it was getting a bit squishy. Tsunade smirked, with a slight laugh. Jiraiya stuck out his lip, pouting at her. "You should really go get some exercise or something instead of hopelessly wandering about, hoping some uninhibited woman will take pity on you and your desperation." Suddenly there was a gleam in Jiraiya's eye. "You know, there is some exercise that you and I could." Jiraiya's train of thought was shattered as he was suddenly met with the image of a very large fist held a few inches from his face. His eyes moved down to stare at Tsunade's equally large breasts. "My eyes are up here, Jiraiya," Tsunade said in a cool and calm, yet threatening manner. Yeah," Jiraiya laughed nervously. Tsunade snorted and turned to leave. Jiraiya's mind raced. "Wait, how about lunch?" Tsunade paused, slowly raising her eyebrow. "On me?" Tsunade narrowed her eyes in suspicion. Jiraiya blinked, quickly clarifying himself. "I mean I'll pay for it," he exclaimed, waving his hands. "Not that lunch is on me in some manner, I get it, Jiraiya," she smirked, poking him in the side. "I'm not one to pass up a free meal." Temari sighed as she sat on a box at a street corner next to a quaint little restaurant. While the Sand Kunoichi was somewhat curious as to what her brothers were up to at this moment, she was enjoying her little break, simply sitting there taking in the view as many half-naked Konoha shinobi walked past. "Ah," she said dreamily. Suddenly, a noise behind her caught her attention. She sat up and spun around to see a rather round Jinin. "Hi," Chuchi smiled and waved at her. His face had a tint of red to it. Temari looked at him strangely. Chuchi continued smiling. The Kunoichi tilted her head, slight amusement spread across her face. "What is it?" Chuchi fidgeted. "Your hair." Temari raised an eyebrow. "You're pretty." Chuchi finally managed to get out. "What?" she said with surprise. Choji's eyes went wide, panicking. "I mean, a friend said you're pretty, right?" "A friend?" "Yeah. A friend." Temari said slowly. "Really?" Chuchi grinned and nodded profusely, glowing red with embarrassment. An image of Shikamaru appeared in the blonde's head. "Ah, how sweet of him," Temari said dreamily, jumping to conclusions. "Huh?" Chuchi said flatly. He was very confused for a few moments until he suddenly realized that she must have thought he was talking about Shikamaru when he was really talking about himself. Chuchi slowly began to narrow his eyes. "You know," Chuchi began after a few moments of thought, "I've got some real interesting stories to tell." "HM?" Temari asked with a questioning look. Chuchi then proceeded to spill the goods on everything he's seen since he started following Shikamaru around the past few weeks. As Chuchi finished his exciting tales of excruciating detail, Temari began to twitch profusely. "He's done what with who?" Temari yelled with increasing volume. Tsunade breathed, after gulping down another bottle of sake. Jiraiya glanced up at the bartender and ordered several more things of alcohol. "So," Jiraiya, Tsunade hiccuped, I thought you were broke. Where did you get this money? Jiraiya grinned, I borrowed that Naruto's purse. The Hokage glared at him disapprovingly. I'm gonna give it back. Jiraiya defended. Eventually there was a pause. Tsunade rested her elbows on the table. I wonder how Naruto's doing out there. Not too well from what I've seen. Jiraiya took another gulp of sake. Tsunade sighed. For the life of me I can't figure it out. He continued. What? The Hokage asked, shifting her eyes over to Jiraiya. How someone that invented the sexy no jutsu the pervert's nose bled simply from the thought, could know so little about women. That's not saying much. Tsunade closed her eyes, smirking, you barely know anything about women and you write porn novels. Hey! Jiraiya exclaimed with a hurt look. But, seriously, Jiraiya, Tsunade continued, think. Have you ever actually fully looked at Naruto's sexy no jutsu without the smoke or something else still covering bits and things? Jiraiya blinked, wide-eyed in realization, and the truth is Tsunade breathed into Jiraiya's ear, sending his whole body tingling. Say it isn't so. Jiraiya yelled, tearing out of the bar. It only took him a few minutes to find Naruto as well as Kiba, who seemed to be running away in distress from something. Naruto! Jiraiya called out. Naruto came to a screeching halt, but Kiba kept on running. The eyes. Kiba squealed as he disappeared off into the distance. What is it, Ero-sanin? Naruto said curiously, scrunching up his face. Quick, Naruto! Jiraiya said in a panic, jumping around, do your sexy no jutsu. Naruto crossed his arms, opening one eye to look at the white-haired pervert suspiciously. Jiraiya waved his hands about, come on, he said with growing impatience. After a few moments of contemplation, Naruto shrugged. Okay. Jiraiya nodded. Sexy no jutsu. Poof! Some of the smoke cleared to reveal a blonde, busted Naruto. Jiraiya quickly began to fan the smoke that remained covering the female Naruto's breasts, among other things. Jiraiya twitched slightly. He couldn't believe it. Tsunade was right. Naruto, Jiraiya said slowly, devastated tears welling up in his eyes, you do realize that women have nipples, right? Naruto blinked, before glancing down and poking his round nipple-less boob. Whoa, really? Naruto said with awe, I had no idea. Jiraiya rolled his eyes. He was about ready to go cry in a faraway corner somewhere. How else do you think the milk comes out? Jiraiya nearly screamed at the blonde genin. Naruto twitched. And milk comes from girls' breasts? Jiraiya nodded. Oh God! I drank some of that this morning. Naruto began to turn green. Naruto, Jiraiya said slowly. That kind of milk comes from cows. The blonde tilted his head with a confused look. Does that mean that cows have boobs too? Ah. The white-haired man growled in aggravation, this conversation is going nowhere. Naruto blinked, releasing the sexy no jutsu. Huh? Look! Jiraiya said, narrowing his eyes, getting up in Naruto's face. What I want to know is, how the hell did you come up with the sexy no jutsu when it is pretty obvious that you have never seen a real naked female? Naruto paused for a moment, scratching his head in thought. Well, one day I was passing by a ladies' clothing store and they were changing the clothes on some lady mannequins, and so they were all naked, and so then I was like, whoa, that would make an awesome jutsu. Naruto grinned really wide. Jiraiya could only stare with his mouth hanging open. In a dark alleyway, two sinister-looking figures finalized their plans, their curved shadows dancing on the walls. So, you know what to do, right? Yeah. Remember, find him, and lure him in my direction. She said in a whisper. Right, and you do the same. Don't let him catch on. Their grins glowed in the darkness. A few seconds later, they were off, heading in opposite directions. Shikamaru was in the middle of a sneeze when he was knocked to the ground by a yellow blur who was not paying attention to where he was going. Naruto looked up, grinning, and began loudly, Hey Shikamaru, what's happened? Shhhh. I'm being followed. Shikamaru whispered, slapping a hand over Naruto's perpetually flapping mouth. Huh? Naruto asked loudly. Be quiet! I'm being tracked. Shikamaru sent a shifty look in all directions. Oh shit! A figure thought, quickly ducking back into the shadows, I hope he hasn't seen me yet. Okay, Naruto said slowly, remembering to be quiet at this time. Shikamaru shot Naruto a glance. For the next few tense moments they began to tippy-toe a few steps forward right up until Hey Shika! Came a loud jubilated squeal. Wah! Shikamaru and Naruto screamed in terror as they fell backwards together from being startled so suddenly. While Shikamaru was having a few moments of trouble breathing, Naruto sat up and blinked, looking at the one who surprised them. "Oh, hey Sakura," Naruto greeted. Sakura had just suddenly jumped in front of the two. "Sakura, why?" Shikamaru began, holding his head with his hand. "Oh, Shikamaru," Sakura sing-songed, trying to put on her best act, "you've got to come see." Sakura grabbed him by the arm and pulled him up. "See what?" Sakura tried to think quickly as she dragged Shikamaru toward the intersection with another street, leaving Naruto sitting on his butt. "Oh, it's very, very interesting," Shika pondered. Sakura put on her biggest fake smile, thinking, I hope Ino fulfilled her end of the deal. Suddenly, Shikamaru and Sakura's ears perked up as they began to hear a rising wail that was getting louder and bingo. Sakura grinned in realization. Wah! Sakura and Shikamaru watched as Sasuke suddenly appeared from the intersecting street, running for dear life from Ino, who was pretending to threaten him with Shintenshin no Jutsu. He would do anything to avoid that again. As soon as Ino spotted Sakura, she stopped running. Sasuke, noticing that he was no longer being pursued, ended up stopping just a little ways from Shikamaru and Sakura. Shikamaru stared at Sasuke questioningly, as Ino and Sakura sent each other a few discreet hand signals. 321 Oh Shikamaru! Ino and Sakura suddenly exclaimed at the same time. Shikamaru and Sasuke turned their heads to see the girls pouting their lips out and making big googly eyes filled with sparkles. Suddenly sparkles appeared all around Ino and Sakura as though they were shimmering. Sasuke's mouth fell open. Shikamaru barely had the chance to raise his eyebrow in question before he was mauled. The Chunny's eyes went wide as Sakura and Ino attached themselves at his arms. Oh Shika! Sakura moaned. Oh sexy pineapple head! Ino cooed, fawning all over him. Sasuke twitched in confusion. His brain just couldn't process what he was seeing, much less believe it. The Uchiha's eyes were about to bug out. Shikamaru, we love you, the girls said playfully, running their hands up and down his body. Shikamaru's face began to turn deep red, no matter the fact that he was deeply confused and somewhat petrified at the whole sudden ordeal. Meanwhile, Sasuke's mouth was flapping open and closed like a fish out of water. After several minutes, which Ino and Sakura figured would be enough, they discreetly winked at each other, backing off from Shika, pretending to be about to fall over. Oh, Shika, Sakura sighed, wandering backwards, a hand over her face as though she was about to faint. Ino did the same, cunningly making her way away. Oh, the hotness emanating from you is far too strong. There were a few more OS and AS from the curiously fainting girls until they had disappeared out of sight, leaving two very confused male shinobi behind. Shikamaru blinked several times. Sasuke's neck creaked a few times as he turned his head to look at Shikamaru. The Uchiha moved his mouth up and down, trying to make the words come out. After a moment, Shikamaru realized that Sasuke was looking at him strangely, searching for answers. The Chunin shrugged. Well, don't look at me. Off in the distance, two kunoichi gave each other a high five. Do you think it worked? Huh. I think so. Did you see his face? She replied, giggles erupting. After overcoming the initial shock of the incident, Sasuke slowly trudged away to rethink his mating plan. He had really thought that he was ready for them too. Well, Ino without her using that jutsu, but still Sasuke looked distraught. He had worked so hard to overcome his fears, and now this. He had found many other videos that he had stolen from Kakashi's apartment that he had broken into a week ago when he wasn't home. Sasuke had taken the time to memorize many more techniques with his Sharingan. But, what to do now? Should he try to win back the attention of Ino or Sakura? What other girls were there? An image of Tenten appeared in his mind. He thought of her dark hair and dark eyes. She might be good. She seems sane and normal. I could see myself maybe reviving my clan with her. Oh, how wrong he was. Naruto became curious about all the commotion and finally got up off his butt to see where Shikamaru and Sakura went. As he was getting up, he spotted Kiba walking towards him. Hey, Kiba, what's I heard yelling? Kiba explained, what's going on? Naruto and Kiba ran up to Shikamaru, who still had a dazed and confused expression on his face. Before Naruto and Kiba could get out of him what had just happened, or where Sakura had run off to, they heard a screeching yell, the owner of which was quickly approaching. Shikamaru! The Chunin nearly jumped out of his skin as a dust cloud surrounded him from the sheer force of the person running so fast towards him. When the dust settled, Shikamaru found himself face to face with a very angry Temari. And Shuji wasn't far behind, wandering up quickly to see the show. Naruto and Kiba simply stared. You! Tamari struck her fan out at Shikamaru, holding it inches away from his nose. You two timing three timing. Tamari paused to recount on her fingers for greater emphasis. No, for timing bastard. Before he had any chance to make any sort of case in his defense, Tamari slapped him across the face. Let's see how you like it, she exclaimed, pointing at Shikamaru. Her eyes scanned the crowd. Tamari then immediately walked over in a huff, bypassing Shuji who had his lips out puckered up and suddenly grabbing a different surprised Genin by the collar, laying a big wet smack on Naruto, locking lips with him. Shikamaru blinked. Was all that Naruto could manage as Tamari released his lips. Kiba gaped while Chuji slumped in disappointment. Off in the shadows, a hidden Hinata who had been stealthily stalking Naruto all the while saw the display, letting out a harsh gasp, suddenly feeling the burning desire of revenge and the hurt of betrayal. After Tamari led a confused Naruto away, Kiba and Shuji were left standing in silence. Suddenly, a realization hit Kiba. Shikamaru's a slut. Meanwhile, far away in a far-off, dark, underground lair, a pain. The pain! The shadowy figure complained, stepping from his shower, his arms dripping with blood. Here are my ARMS. He cursed mentally, they won't move. As he wandered about the bathroom, the man stood and stared at the toilet that seemed to be just sitting there, mocking him with its very existence. Suddenly a loud voice boomed through the lair, Kabuto. Kabuto flinched slightly as he heard the voice calling him. Kabuto! Coming, Orochimaru-sama. He called out in quick reply. I need a bathroom attendant. Now! Orochimaru ordered. Kabuto grumbled slightly as he slowly made his way to Orochimaru. Kabuto, get in here! Kabuto twitched. At least Sasuke will be here soon, he thought. The Sound Four were ordered to Konoha moments ago. Then, with a new body, at least Orochimaru could go drain the snake on his own. Tsunade returned to her office to find someone waiting for her. Hokage-sama, Kakashi began. What are you? She started before she looked at his face. What are you doing with your mask on? You're not supposed to have that. Tsunade scolded, marching right up to him to remove it. But, when she reached out to touch his cheek, her fingers suddenly felt wet. Kakashi watched as the Hokage pulled back, flipping her hand over to observe her now black-stained fingers. You didn't! She stared at him, not having expected this. The copy nin just sort of grinned at her. He had actually gone and painted a mask on his face.
Chapter 22, Trading Up. He slowly blinked, opening his eyes. The last thing he could remember was the epic rock, paper, scissors battle fought between several female Umbu and Anko. Then, hands lifting him into the air. Then darkness. Iraka awoke to giggling voices. He moved slightly, trying to get his bearings on where he was, only to find his arms tied behind his back. Iraka was laying flat on his stomach on what appeared to be a one-person-sized table. He turned his head to see three females with Umbu animal masks crowding over something. What was, oh god, they have that book. Iraka panicked mentally as he saw its signature orange color. Okay. Calm down. Pretend to be asleep. Pretend to be asleep. Pretend to be LCO shit, they noticed. Hi! We just found this really interesting chapter of this book, a voice said to the teacher in a sing-song tone, thrusting the open book in his face. Iraka gulped. It's something we've been wanting to try for some time now. She grinned underneath her mask. He came the slow calculating laughs of the surrounding women. Iraka began to sweat slightly. But aren't you all pregnant already? He asked in confusion. What could you possibly want with me? Silly man, one woman said, patting him on the back in a friendly way. Didn't you know being pregnant can make you even more horny? Another Umbu female continued in a somewhat crazed voice. Iraka twitched slightly. Moments later, two of the women were behind him, tugging at his pants legs. As Iraka held a brief moment of silence for himself, he heard the footsteps of one of the girls running to the side of the room where another gathering of Umbu women were hanging out. Hey! She yelled in a pleasant voice, do any of you guys have a paddle? Kakashi grinned at Tsunade as the black paint trickled down his neck. The Hokage narrowed her eyes at him, her eye twitching angrily. You dumbass! That's not healthy. Tsunade stated flatly, crossing her arms, especially if that stuff gets in your mouth. Kakashi's grin slumped slightly. Tsunade smirked as she got an idea. He thinks he's so smart. She thought. I'll teach him to try and get away with circumventing my law. The Hokage cleared her throat to get the copy nin's full attention. As a medical ninja, I cannot let this go. Shizune! She yelled sternly. Within seconds, Shizune appeared in the doorway. Yes, ma'am? Take him to the medical ward, strip him naked, give him a complete physical exam, and wash that stuff off of his face. Right away. Shizune replied, approaching Kakashi with a large smile. But Kakashi stuttered, raising a slightly shaking hand in protest. Yeah, he'll get to show yours off to Shizune. Tsunade said slyly. Shizune grinned as she hauled Kakashi off. He was whimpering slightly. And he had thought that his plan was so clever too. After the door to the Hokage's office shut and Kakashi and Shizune were gone, an umbu slung in through one of the open windows. Hokage-sama, I'm here with a report. Yes? I came across a fully clothed Sannin. I wanted to know if the rules apply to them. The Hokage paused, tapping a finger to her lip, and thought. Come to think of it, it wouldn't be good for them to stand out so much, especially if we were to come under attack. Go inform them that they should blend in as best they can and obey my decrees. Yes, Hokage-sama. As the umbu turned to leave, Tsunade suddenly thought of something else. Hold on. She called out, causing the umbu to pause. Please also send out a message to the entire village. No male shinobi will be allowed to wear any sort of face paint from this point forward. Yes, Hokage-sama. Oh, and outlaw hair ties while you're at it, I forgot to specify that clearly. Hinata dropped the pair of orange pants that she had tucked so gingerly in her arms. The Hyuga's mouth hung open as she watched the blonde Sankunoichi rush in and kiss Naruto's lips. Those were her lips to kiss, damn it. Hinata quietly thought as she picked up his orange pants from the ground and hid herself back in the dark shadows of the alley. Oh, how her plans were ruined. Flashback to earlier in the day, Hinata sat on her bed in her room, staring at the orange jumpsuit pants she had stolen from her Naruto. Oh, Naruto. She breathed mentally, I wish I had the strength to tell you how I feel. Oh, how I wish I could tell you about what happened that night that I stole you away. Oh, she blushed a deep red as she glanced over at the small orange fox mask that she had sitting across the room on her dresser. Suddenly, an idea struck her. His pants. She gasped, taking them off the wall. I'll tell him I found them right, found them, not stole them. Hinata blushed, smiling wider and wider. Yeah, he'll be so happy, he's sure to notice me. And with that, she grabbed the pants and headed off to find her love. Back to the present, as Chuji, munching away at some chips, decided to go check on Shikamaru, who was still laid out on the ground from Tamari's slap, Kiba's ears perked up at a sound behind him that sounded like sniffling. He spun around to catch a glimpse of a figure darting back into the shadows. Hinata? Kiba asked himself curiously, taking a few steps in that direction. I wonder what's wrong, he thought as he took off after Hinata, following her stealthily, so that she wouldn't notice. Hey Naruto, I see you are having some luck with the ladies. Naruto, attached at the hand to Tamari, blinked, looking up at the origin of the voice. Who are you? Naruto asked simply. The figure raised an eyebrow in confusion. I'm Ebisu, he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the entire world. Naruto scrunched up his face and leaned his head in for a closer look. Who? Ebisu's mouth hung open for a second. Ebisu. You know, he trailed off slightly, looking at Tamari. He continued his line of thought, leaning close to Naruto's face with a whisper, closet pervert and all, that Ebisu blushed slightly with embarrassment. Naruto spent several minutes scrutinizing the man's face and hair. I've never seen you before in my life. Ebisu's eyebrow twitched as he was left completely dumbfounded. Naruto was just completely incapable of recognizing the Jounin without his glasses and bandana. Shizune. Shizune. Gamma called out for Shizune's name over and over again. He had been trying to find her for most of the day. She had run off after his terrible, horrible balding secret had been discovered. On a whim, he decided to check Shizune. Hey, Shizugunma did a double take, what the hell? Before him was none other than Shizune, holding a shower head over the wet glistening silver hair of a completely stark naked Hatake Kakashi, who was currently sitting in front of her with his legs crossed. They turned to look at their visitor. But Guhgunma's mouth flapped up and down. What? Kakashi asked nonchalantly. Why, Shizune, why? Gunma whined in distress, his eyes filling with tears as he ran away from the scene. Once he was gone, Shizune and Kakashi shrugged and went back to their bath. Meanwhile, over in the Akatsuki evil lair, Deidara was about to make a cunning retort to Itachi's comment when Zetsu wandered into the room. Grumble was all that the odd green Akatsuki member offered in greeting. Deidara raised an eyebrow. What's eating you, Zetsu, yeah? Zetsu? Kisame suddenly asked himself, darting back into the main room as screams of terror starting to die down. Hey, maybe I can bribe him into going and getting my sword back. The blue fishy man thought to himself. Zetsu mumbled to himself for a moment before replying to Deidara. It won't stop. Yeah. Deidara was starting to get curious. Following me around. What? It. Who? Zetsu turned and opened the main entrance door just long enough for them to catch a glimpse. That. Hi. The figure waved jubilantly. Toby's a good boy. Slam. Itachi raised an eyebrow. What does it want? It wants in. In the door? In Akatsuki. Snort ha ha ha. Deidara doubled over laughing. Toby will do anything. Came a muffled plea from the other side of the door. Go away, anything you say? Kisame interrupted, jumping toward the door, pressing his ear to it. At this action, Zetsu looked a bit disturbed, while Deidara was waving his arms making an O. Signals in the air. Kisame looked over at Itachi, whose expression was unresponsive, which basically meant that he didn't care one way or the other. Can you go fetch my huge weapon for me? Then Toby and Akatsuki? And no, Kisame's eyes wandered off, but, Eula, he looked around the room as he quickly tried to think of something. You can be Akatsuki's bitch. Everyone in the room did a double take at Kisame. I mean dog now, I mean mascot, yeah you can be Akatsuki's mascot thing, and Kisame's sweat dropped. Itachi rolled his eyes and went into another room. The shark man waited in anticipation for a reply from the other side of the door. Yay! Toby will get Fishy Man's weapon. Where does Toby find it? Konoha. And so, Toby set off on his way. Later that afternoon, Temari and Naruto were walking along when they heard a commotion up ahead. As they neared the figures, she could make out a Konoha Umbu speaking to Kankuro and some woman with markings on her face. I have to what? Sorry, Hokage's orders. My precious face paint, Kankuro whined as he allowed the Umbu to wipe his face off with a cloth. Hana blinked. What? She shrieked, you mean your beautiful face markings are fake? Ha! Kankuro blinked, looking at the Inuzuka as the Umbu went to removing his hood and outfit down to his waist. Hana rubbed a finger across her red face markings to illustrate. Mine, she said, are permanent. Oh, Kankuro stated flatly, the Umbu gone. Don't know me, Hana continued, if you really love me, you'll get your face tattooed. She then began to walk off, leaving the Sannin in the dust. But, sweet cheeks! Kankuro whined, reaching out for her. What are you doing? Kankuro turned his head to see his sister along with Naruto. Oh hey Temari. Kankuro said, slowly looking over at the grinning genin next to her. Why are you walking around with him? Kankuro questioned with a raised eyebrow, gesturing at Naruto. Temari looked over at the genin who was holding her hand. Long story. She replied, giving him an odd look. Why are you half naked? Her brother sighed, grinning sheepishly. Long story. Suddenly, Hana, who had been in the process of wandering off, spotted something that sparked her interest and soon sprinted over, bending down slightly, coming face to face with Naruto. Naruto scrunched up his face at her in curiosity. Hana replied by poking his cheek. Interesting face markings you got there. She grinned at him, rubbing a finger across his whisker marks. Thanks? Naruto said. Hana paused for a moment and thought before looking up at Temari with puppy dog eyes. Is there any way I could borrow him for a bit? She asked hopefully, pointing at Naruto. Temari glanced over at the blonde shinobi who was currently sporting a rather confused look on his face. There was a long pause. Sure, Temari smiled at Hana, I'm pretty much done with him anyway. Wah! Naruto managed to get out as Hana slung him over her shoulder. Thanks a lot. She grinned, heading off, I'll be sure to return him to you later. Okay, bye. Temari waved the display, leaving Kankuro twitching profusely. Sniffle. Sniffle. Nobody loves me. Inner Kankuro cried. Sasuke was jumping roof to roof, scanning the ground, until he happened to spot Niji. Jumping to the ground, he addressed the Hyuga. Do you happen to know where Tenten or Hinata is? Niji glanced around all suspicious-like before replying to the Uchiha. That's what I'd like to know. Hinata peeped with a tiny sneeze as she sat on a bench next to a busy street with lots of ninja and villagers walking past. She had decided to console herself by looking at passing guys with her Byakugan, mentally comparing and imagining their bodies as Naruto's. Unbeknownst to her, Kiba was watching her carefully from down the road, wondering why she was just sitting there. Hinata sighed. She began to find that she was actually enjoying the show. That was until 3 certain sand shinobi came heading her way. There walked Temari, Kankuro, who was in the middle of eating something along with Gaara, who they had just recently met up with just moments ago. Ugh. Hinata thought as Kankuro passed, but then oh. She actually said loud enough for the 3 of them, along with Kiba, to hear. Temari and Kankuro shot a glance at each other. Hinata was looking at Gaara. Hinata peeped again. What the hell? Kankuro questioned. Temari shrugged and shook her head. Hinata got up off the bench and took a few steps toward the red-haired shinobi. For a moment, Gaara and Hinata's eyes met. Then, Gaara blinked and began to simply walk off again, a slight look of curiosity lingering on his face as Hinata actually followed along, attempting to walk next to him. His face remained fairly emotionless, and he didn't seem to care one way or another. Gaara's siblings could only stand there as they watched their brother wander off with the Hyuga following close behind. What could she have seen? Temari asked, awestruck to no one in particular. Well, Kankuro began. No, I mean, why him? She continued. Well, Kankuro began again, Shikaku is a demon tanuki, you know, a raccoon dog. He paused for a moment, taking a bite of the food he was carrying around. And you know what they say about raccoon dogs? Temari shook her head unsurely. Kiba, who had been standing there the whole time as the closest canine expert in the area, decided to explain. The Inuzuka coughed uneasily. Tanuki are legendary for having really huge testicles in comparison to the rest of their bodies. Temari blinked repeatedly as that information set in. Oh God, I didn't need to know that. Temari screeched in complaint as she slapped her hands on the sides of her head, watching Gaara walk off into the distance. Kankuro took a bite of some food he was eating, making crunching noises as he spoke. You know, just cause Shikaku has big balls doesn't necessarily mean that Gaara shut up.
Chapter 23, Fancy meeting you here. Temari blinked slowly as she watched Gaara walking off into the sunset with the odd Hyuga girl following him. She looked at the scene, blinking again until it suddenly hit her. Removing her hands from their position covering her ears, she gasped. What is it, Temari? Kankuro asked with sudden concern and curiosity in his voice. His sister slowly creaked her head towards him, an almost crazed, worrisome look on her face. Kankuro, Temari said in a low voice that began to shake, Do you see anything wrong with Gaara? The Sannin paused and scratched at his bare chest. Kankuro muttered as he stared at his red-haired brother and contemplated Temari's comment. Suddenly, his train of thought was interrupted by the sound of hurried and heavy footsteps pounding into the shingles of the roof to the right of the group. Kiba snapped his head over to look at the 2 figures speeding along. Umbu? The Inuzuka casually questioned to no one in particular. Temari twitched. Kankuro's mouth slowly separated from his lips as he did a double take. Gaara walking off into the distance. 2 Umbus speeding straight for him. Oh shit, Kankuro exclaimed, Gaara still has on his top. Gaara! Kankuro yelled, cupping his hands next to his mouth. His cries were not heard, and within seconds Gaara was forced to stop in his tracks due to 2 female Umbu having jumped from the roofs, blocking his path. Startled, Hinata backed off a few steps. From the expressions of the 2 sand shinobi standing next to him, Kiba quickly assessed that this was not going to end well. The Inuzuka looked down at Akamaru for a moment before looking back at his teammate. Hinata! Kiba cried out, Run! Oh? Hinata muttered, spinning around to meet the worried gaze of her teammates several yards away. She clutched her arms to her chest and took one long last look at Gaara before switching off her Byakugan and sprinting away as fast as she could go. Now all that remained were the icy stares being exchanged between the 2 Konoha Umbu and 1 Gaara of the desert. One of the kunoichi glared through the black eye holes of her mask and forcefully stated, You are to remove your upper clothing by supreme order of the Hokage. Kankuro and Temari held their breath. Gaara blinked slowly, oh so slowly, letting his dark eyelids fall, while a look that could almost be called amusement crossed his curling lips. I'm not wearing any clothes. Gaara said plainly, shooting the 2 women a glance. What? I said I am not wearing any clothes. Drops of sweat poured from the sides of each Umbu's head. But, you do have on clothes. One exclaimed, pointing at his shirt, I see them right there. The 2 kunoichi watched as the redhead uncrossed his arms, tilted his head toward his sleeve, and gave the fabric a tug. It stretched to a certain point before turning a grayish-brown and cracking. After a second, the piece fell to the ground and shattered into a dozen pieces. It's sand? The woman questioned in disbelief, Your clothes are nothing but sand? Gaara nodded. So the other woman concluded, that means you have actually been walking around completely naked? The Sannin shrugged. While the two Umbu were a bit dumbfounded, can you rearrange your sand so that Gaara was way ahead of them, already altering the sand to make it look like his chest was bare? The two females blinked. Alright, have a nice day then, I guess, one Umbu said as they left, returning to the rooftops in search of other men who needed stripping. A few moments later, Gaara returned to his siblings who were curiously sprawled out on the ground, legs in the air, twitching slightly. He could almost swear that Kankuro was foaming at the mouth. What happened to you? Gaara stated flatly, looking at his brother and sister quizzically. Hinata ran and ran until she could run no longer. She breathed heavily as she slowed down. She looked behind her to see if anyone was following. When she saw nothing, she sighed and backed up, practically falling onto the double bench behind her. She sat back and sighed again, harder this time, as she stared off into the sky, watching the sun begin to set, lower and lower. The Hyuga let her head fall into her hands, mumbling to herself about Naruto. Why did he kiss that other woman? It should have been me. It was surprising that she did not sense the presence behind her. Hyuga. A deep voice stated. A gasp erupted from Hinata. She cautiously turned her head to see who had spoken, grasping her satchel that contained freshly sharpened kunai just in case. The first thing Hinata's eyes met was an arm that was propped up along the cool metal of the top of the other bench that was back to hers. The next thing she saw was dark hair, softly flowing in the breeze. Hinata's eyes met the eyes of one Sasuke Uchiha. Hinata blinked in surprise. Sometime earlier Sasuke had given up on his search for Tenten or hell, any breathing female his age, and had decided to rest on this bench for a while and wait. Hinata looked at the Uchiha with a questioning look. Problems? Sasuke asked casually. Huh? Oh, Hinata blushed, embarrassed, as sorry, I was mumbling to myself. I have problems as well. He stated a bit mysteriously. The Uchiha closed his eyes and faced away from her once again. Sasuke? Hyuga, he cut her off, I realize you and I have barely spoken to each other, but I have a proposition that I will simply state, and you can take it or leave it, no questions asked. Out of curiosity, she went along and nodded. With that, Sasuke began to speak. It is very simple, and yet very complicated. I have two goals in life. To accomplish one, I must go train, but I cannot train here as long as this sex frenzy mission is going on. Therefore, I must go elsewhere to train, but it may be dangerous, so I need to accomplish my other goal before I leave. My second goal is to revive my clan, and for that I need a woman or several, he added quickly. Hinata raised an eyebrow slightly. To make a long story short, he continued, if it so interests you, Hyuga Hinata, for whatever reasons you may have, meet me in the middle of this night, between midnight and dawn in my bed. Hinata's face turned a deep red among other things. The Hyuga continued to stare straight forward as Sasuke, behind her, slowly stood up on top of the bench. He lingered there for a few moments staring down at the girl before disappearing off elsewhere in a hurry. Jiraiya was out poking about, looking through at the edges of a fence, trying to catch a glimpse of some scantily clad women on the other side. It was some sort of workout club for the village women on the other side. He was enjoying himself until he began to be distracted by droning voices coming from next door. The white-haired pervert attempted to ignore it for a while, but his curiosity got the better of him. Jiraiya walked a little ways over to the front of the other building. It had a hastily thrown-together white banner across the entrance that read, Therapy meeting tonight? The Sannin read curiously, raising an eyebrow just a bit. The white-haired man took a few steps in and peered around the corner. He blinked. Looking around, he saw a block of chairs filled with various male shinobi of the village. There were many familiar faces. A small brown podium was at the front in the direction all the chairs faced. Jiraiya pondered a moment, scratching his head. What the hell, I may as well, he stated, taking an inconspicuous seat in the back. After a few quiet moments, one of the shinobi walked up to the podium. Hi, he stated, my name is Rado. Hi Rado. The ninja in the audience chimed back in monotone. And Rado stifled a few sniffles, no one loves me 'cause I'm ugly. Jiraiya made an odd face as 24 heartfelt ahs erupted around him in a similar tone. After Rado had a seat, two ninja got up together and went to the podium. Hi, I'm Izumo. Hi Izumo. And I'm Kotetsu. Hi Kotetsu. And, Kotetsu set a hand on Izumo's shoulder and said dramatically, we can't get a date 'cause the women think we're special friends because we hang out all the time. After enduring another round of heartfelt ahs and other remarks of sympathy, Jiraiya felt like gagging. Izumo went to sit down, but Kotetsu had more to say apparently. And now, I give the floor to our organizer, Ibiki. Ibiki waved to the audience as he walked up to the stage, smiling a much bigger smile than usual. I have an announcement, he began. All eyes focused on him. Me and Anko just got done with some sweet loving, Ibiki grinned widely, so, I won't be needing to be coming to these meetings anymore. Crickets chirped. Ibiki then quickly left the building in order to get back to the fun, leaving a stunned, silent and twitching in horror audience. Jiraiya left, as the other ninjas from therapy trickled out into the street. I sure as hell don't want to end up a permanent member of that club, Jiraiya remarked, digging around in his pocket for something in particular. Desperate times call for extreme measures, he said, sweat dropping. Jiraiya held in front of him a certain little black book that was marred with red ink, no thanks to the corrections of a certain green beast. Nightfall, the clock struck midnight and a stranger stood underneath the Konoha gates, peering in. He had run so very fast to get there. Konoha, he repeated to himself, this is where Toby will find it. He walked a little ways before tripping over something which sent him flying into the ground. Toby sat up as dirt slid off of his swirly orange mask. He looked behind him. Someone left thingy and rode. He stated loudly. Toby stared at it for a moment before moving along. Now where could Fishy Man's sword be? Toby said, scratching his head when in fact the object he had just tripped over was Kisame's weapon. It just wasn't sword-like enough to register in Toby's mind. After a while of wandering around, Toby managed to find himself in front of the building where many Umbu women had been abducting men off to. Not knowing any better, Toby strolled right on in there and observed several women wearing animal masks. One of them had a paddle in the air and there was a guy on the table with his bare butt exposed. Toby found this all to be very strange. Help me, the man on the table whimpered. Toby cocked his head to the side. Oh, who's this? Came the voices of a few of the women as they took note of the new visitor. Toby's sweat dropped as one of the Umbus suddenly strolled over, sticking her masked face right up in his. After a few moments of staring at him, she backed off slightly and asked, What's your name, sweetie? Toby! Toby exclaimed happily, thrusting his arms into the air. He then felt a poke in his back. Spinning around, he found himself looking into the face of another woman. She poked at his orange swirl mask with her finger. What kind of an Umbu are you anyway, a snail or something? Toby scratched his head in confusion. Toby's not a whack. He never had a chance. 3 a.m. Sasuke was speeding through the woods in a hurry to get back to his apartment to see if Hinata was going to show. He had been out in the woods having a special training session with himself. He made it past the gate and had just jumped up on a rooftop next to the side of a larger building when suddenly the air around him moved, throwing leaves from a nearby tree in all directions. The Uchiha looked up to find himself staring at 4 odd shinobi in unfamiliar clothing. He was about to take a defensive position before he noticed the sound headbands they wore. Sasuke sighed loudly, taking a seat on the roof. Thank God you guys got here, I've been waiting forever. Sakan blinked, raising an eyebrow. Wait, what? Kidomaru exclaimed, registering his surprise with all 6 of his arms. The hell? Tayuya exclaimed, shooting a glance at Jirobo. Jirobo just kind of shrugged. Come with us. Sakan stated to Sasuke, Orochimaru's waiting. Now? Sasuke asked, trailing off, his mind wandering to his appointed rendezvous that he was currently overdue for. The Sound 4 nodded. Sasuke grimaced slightly. Yeah, that sounds great and all, the Uchiha began slowly, but I really need to go impregnate a few women first and then I'd be happy to. Yeah, that's what they all say. They did not look amused. Sasuke's mouth gaped as he was about to make a retort, but wait, what's that music? Tayuya stated, putting a hand to her ear. Huh? The others looked around in various directions. They could hear it too. Sasuke slapped a hand on his face, running it down his skin slowly. Oh God, he said with disdain, the Umbu must be having another rave? Yeah, all anyone does around here anymore is have constant sex. Sasuke pouted, crossing his arms. Sex, you say? Kidomaru piped up with a look of interest. Constant, you say? Tayuya asked with growing excitement. Sasuke blinked. Tayuya tapped a finger to her lip as she thought it over. She looked over in the direction of the music. She looked over at Sasuke. Music. Sasuke. Sex. Sasuke. Constant sex. Sasuke. There was a long pause. Fuck this shit, I want some sex. Tayuya suddenly exclaimed in an outburst, darting off of the roof and running in the direction of the music. Yeah! Kidomaru similarly exclaimed, following Tayuya. Orochimaru never lets us have any fun. Hoo-hoo! Jirobo hollered as he and Sakan disappeared off, following the other two. Wait! Sasuke called out to them desperately. All he got in reply was a distant "see ya." Sasuke's eye twitched. Elsewhere, the Sound Four began to scout out what fun there was to be had at the Umbu building. Tayuya was intrigued by yelling off in the distance, so she followed the sound. She came upon a strange scene. Toby's a goo, whack. Oh, de boy! The female Umbu raised the paddle again and gave the odd man that was tied to the table another slap on the butt. Toby's a goo, whack. Good boy. Toby's a goo, whack. Good boy. Toby's a goo, whack. Good boy. Yes, Toby's a very good boy. The Umbu said slyly, giving the paddling a break and walking away. Toby looked up as the Sound Kunoichi approached him with a playful look. Toby's a good boy, he said enthusiastically. Well, she said, smirking at him, Tayuya's a bad girl.
Go support me on Patreon for more fanfiction that includes adult content as well. The link is in the description and like everywhere on my channel. Thank you for your views, likes, subscriptions, and overall support of my ongoing efforts to bring great content to all of you.